tidy up. And can you tell us about the wedding invitation?
Obviously, Chair, like many other people in South Africa at that point, the famous wedding, I was also invited to that wedding, not through a phone call or not through anything. There was an invite that was delivered, and I refused categorically to go to that wedding. So I never attended that wedding.
You never attended that wedding?
Never attended
yes.
that wedding. Consciously, I must say.
Yes, okay. Okay.
And then we're at paragraph 65 of your statement.
So after that, I mean, it became apparent to me, Chair, that from Chapas' comments at certain points about him having had a few discussions with ESSA about the Middle East and all of this, it seems as if they were developing some kind of relationship. I cannot categorically put a finger on it. Yes. It was a gut feel.
Yes, yeah. But from what he was reporting to you informally or verbally, you gained the impression that they were working together.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So, as I had indicated that I had said to Nchepe that every so and again I want some feedback about what progress you have been making with these things, and he invited me to a few coffee sessions with ESSA so that they could give me an update, because that was the expectation. And I was also I was interested to know what progress and what discussions they were having.
Can I ask you to pause at that point? So we're now really in 2013?
Yes, yeah.
Early 2013?
Yes.
And who attended these coffee sessions?
It was Nchepe, ESSA, and myself.
Thank you. Continue.
So in one such meeting, we were discussing, and I remember clearly that the discussion was also about them having identified some potential business that they could do in the UAE, and that they were exploring that particular business, but that they will come back to me when they've matured that discussion. And ESSA in the meeting then also said he was also looking at, and this is an interesting point, at what are other capabilities in the country with regard to companies that have a capability that they could look at. Okay. And then he specifically said to me that they have been looking at the issue of VR laser. And he said, what's your opinion on that? So I said, I have known the company for a while. They've been a historical supplier to Denton, and they've had a good track record. There's nothing that I have understood or been brought to my attention that they're not a company of good repute. And I ended the discussion by saying, yes, I'm familiar with the company, and it's a good company. And that was it. We didn't talk. Now, VR Laser at that point, as you know, when Mr. Gianni was giving his testimony, had been a supplier to Denton for many years. And in fact, if I read it correctly, he was saying that it was a strategic supplier because of the very specialist capabilities that they had there.
In fact, he went further to say that it's Mr. Nchepe who introduced him to ESSA when Mr. Gianni, to show that here are business people who are following the procedures that you know apply at Denton.
No, Chair. There was absolutely nothing of that sort. I mean, because there was nothing.
Was it normal to have so many meetings with people who want to do business with Denton without there being a formal proposal?
Chair, I mean, there have always been meetings with people and that, but in this instance, I think the abnormality was the background to what had happened.
I would imagine that a first meeting would be normal to hear what people have to say and so on and so on, and point them, maybe if necessary, to what the procedures are, if they have ideas or proposals that could lead to business for both Denel and them. But I'm just wondering whether it's normal to have a second and a third and all these coffee shop meetings that, from what I understand, Mr. Njebe and yourself and Mr. Essa would have had in 2013, whether that would be viewed as normal practice before somebody says, put something at a formal level to say, this is what I would like to do with you.
Chair, as I've said, I mean, these kind of interactions do take place. And a lot of meetings with clients and customers do happen outside the office, either over lunches or coffees or whatever else. But in this instance, the abnormality, as I've indicated, was given the background of where we'd come from. And as I'd indicated earlier, I was not interested, I was affected, and I wanted to understand what was going on in those discussions. And that's why when Nchepe called me to these coffee sessions, I obliged to go because I wanted to know what was happening. And that is why we had met. And it was not as frequent as maybe is portrayed here.
It might seem, yeah.
It might seem here. It's
Yes.
probably once every
Yes.
2 months, 6 weeks, 2 months.
Yes.
It wasn't like it was once a week or regular meetings or whatever else.
Yeah. Okay.
Then you continue at paragraph 68.
As I said, in terms of, and I kept on saying to him, even after the meetings and that, is that please make sure, as I've indicated to you, do the right thing and make sure that if there's anything that you are not concerned about or whatever else, you must bring it to my attention. Okay. And he agreed with me that he would do that. Okay.
That is Mr. Njebe.
Yes.
Okay.
So in 2014, Minister Gigaba was replaced by Minister Lynn Brown. Okay. So now remember, this is the whole of 2013 gone by. There's nothing of any significance. So it's already 2014. And this is where things start to get interesting because it's almost a year and a half to the date at which the new board comes in and I'm suspended. So this is an important element of the statement. Okay.
But can I just give you a little more context as you continue? By the end of December 2013, ESSA had purchased VR Laser. This is just background information to give context. And if I'm not wrong, Iqbal Sharma had purchased VR Laser Properties. These were two different transactions. But of course, because they were directors in joint companies, there was a relationship there between the purchase of VR Laser, the company that Gianni was trying to capitalize, and VR Laser Properties, on which Gianni's company sat, or had been built, the premises. But I just give you that context because it will become important later on as we discuss what else Berger has to say about this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But of course, I mean, when you refer to the property side, I mean, it would have had nothing to do with it now. We don't, I mean, there's no interaction with properties. It would have been with the actual manufacturing side.
Yes, but there's another leg to that. Let's continue, Chair.
So,
you're at paragraph 70.
This is 2014, okay, so Minister Brown then replaces Minister Gigaba. So this was some time after the last interactions. And then, again, I attended a meeting with him and ESSA, where I think specifically the point that ESSA was trying to make to me is that, oh, there's a new minister, but don't worry, they have the support of the new minister. Okay.
So that is Mr. Essa saying that to you?
To me and to Nchepe, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I see here that you say he said, and you quote, they had the support of the new minister. Was he talking about the Gupta family when he was saying they?
Chair, generally when I say they,
he
and
plus them.
When he refers to they, it's him and the Guptas.
Okay, okay.
I must admit, as I've indicated there, at that point in the last sentence, Chair, is that at that point I have no evidence to corroborate what he was saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, there was nothing that happened that I could say, yes, that is the case, that he said they have had the support at that point.
But given what you had seen and heard in your interactions with Mr. Essa and the Gupta family, from before the first meeting with them to the first meeting, second meeting, and so on, you would you have had grounds to think that they didn't have the kind of political support they were claiming? I'm just asking that against the background that you were brought to the Gupta residence and introduced to the Minister of Public Enterprise at the time. Second meeting, the son of the former president was brought in, and they had been making certain claims, and to somebody this might create the impression that all of these things were done to create a very clear impression in your mind that, look, we've got strong political support.
Chair, I have no doubt that that was the intention. And given the history of what happened prior to that, it probably was the case.
Yes, thank you.
Can I just ask for some clarity? At paragraph 70, you simply say, I attended a further so-called report back meeting with Essa and Nchepe. Who invited you to this meeting?
Nchepe.
Nchepe. Yeah. And did this meeting take place in Johannesburg or at Denel? Where did the meeting take place?
No, in Johannesburg.
In Johannesburg.
Yes.
Same venue?
Yes.
I'm saying same venue, maybe I shouldn't say that. At the Gupta residence,
No.
or where you normally had
The coffee
the other coffee,
yes.
coffee shop. Oh, okay. Yes, okay, thank you.
Continue.
And again, I mean, Chair, I say, even though he had introduced the new element of the new minister and the support, I have been consistent throughout to say that it did not change my view about how they want to relate with Denel. And I reiterated that to him. But at that point, I could see that he was now really becoming irritated with me.
Yes.
You know, that he consistently brought some level of influence to demonstrate to me what his reach was. But yet I kept on saying that this is what is going to happen. You know.
So it was like you were not being threatened, you didn't feel any threat or intimidation to the extent that this might have meant to intimidate you into taking a certain position?
No, Chair, again, I say that it was, in a sense, to show that they have continuous political support and that the interactions and the intervention that they want to take with Denel will continue because of that support. Okay. And as we see later, that is what transpired.
What was Mr. Nchepe's attitude, as may have been revealed either at these coffee shop meetings or outside of them, to your repeated stance that you took, that things had to be done properly? Did you get support from him when you were taking this stance at the coffee shop meetings, or what was the position?
Chair, two elements to that. The first is that he was reporting to me, I was his boss, so he couldn't openly contradict what I was saying there.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And the second part is that he would, like I say, the second part would be he would not openly contradict me.
Yes, yes. But did he ever speak in support of your stance, or he left you to articulate the position and
No,
didn't
no,
say
I
anything
mean,
about it.
on the occasions when he did make a comment on that, he said, he used to call me boss. He used to say, yes, boss, we'll do that.
Okay.
Please continue.
So there was nothing of any significance that happened throughout that whole period there. Then it had come to our attention that it was obviously in the press and whatever else that ESSA had bought VR laser as Mr. Gianni had indicated in his testimony yesterday. I thought it was around July 2014, but from what I heard yesterday, it was earlier.
It was early. It was December going into January.
Yeah, 2014.
Yes.
So whilst all of this was going on, Denel Land Systems, which is a division of Denel, which was run by Mr. Stefan Berger, the CEO of Denel Land Systems, they had concluded a contract with the SANDF, South African National Defence Force, to supply infantry combat vehicles through a contract that was signed in 2007 but only implemented in 2014. And that was purely because of budgetary constraints within the Defence Force, that it took so long for it to be implemented.
Yes, took about 7 years.
Yes, because they were trying to find the money for it. As an aside, I just want to say, the individual who ran Denel Land Systems, Stefan Berger, who was referred to earlier by Abel,
Yes.
it had come to my attention after my suspension that he had also become very close to ESSA during the period while I was still there without my knowledge, and also subsequent to my suspension. It was reported in the press that Berger and Nchepe had been flown to India in the Gupta jet to attend a defense exhibition there. So obviously there was a relationship that had developed and was continuing to develop.
In fact, there's a media article that says that Nchepe and Berger were in discussions with the incoming board before the 2015 board took office.
Yes, sorry, I did not mention that. Advocate Tabash is right. It was also brought to my attention by certain staff in Denel Land Systems post my suspension that during my tenure there in Nchepe and Berger were continuously meeting with the Gupta family without my knowledge. So they were almost running a parallel relationship. One where I'd said to Nchepe, he must engage with ESSA to see where this thing was going on. But they were having their own relationship independently of myself or the formal structures of Denel.
Well, you wouldn't have been surprised if Mr. Nchepe was interacting with them after you asked him to be the person that they should talk to. But you might have known nothing about Mr. Berger interacting with them, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And I think that's what Advocate Tabash is saying.
Yeah. But the reports you got, did they suggest that interaction may have happened before you asked Mr. Nchepe to be the contact person? Or not really?
No, not really.
Yeah,
Chair.
okay. Because insofar as those interactions may have taken place after you had asked him to be the contact person, and if they fell within the scope of the task of his function, you wouldn't consider that, you wouldn't be concerned about that?
No.
Yeah, okay.
Please continue, Mr. Saluji.
So while this was going on, towards the end of 2014, now it's coming about towards end of 2014, we're going into 2015. The board's term is coming to an end, and we're all preparing for that. This, who faced the contract, Chair, which was for the supply of combat vehicles to the Defence Force, required the fabrication of steel hulls, as Mr. Gianni was explaining. And when he explained yesterday, he said that the jigs and fittings and the technology and the welding equipment that they had were of a very specialized nature. He had also indicated when he gave his testimony that they were invited to a supplier's briefing at Denel, if I'm not mistaken, where they were briefed about what the program was and that the tender would come out. So they went through the due process, the tender came out, and VR Laser had won that contract in November 2014, which was signed off at the divisional level by Stefan Berg with VR Laser. That was November 28, 2014.
Can I say, though, that Stefan Berger says about this particular contract that these are my words, you put pressure on them to assist VR Laser and ensure that they got the contract. These are my words, but the import of it is under your instruction, that business of you instructed them to accommodate VR Laser. What do you say
Chair,
to
that could not have been the case because we had an in-house capability as well, which was called Landward Mobile Technology. And I had insisted to understand why were we not contracting this in-house. And they came back with a number of technical reports because the procurement process does not go through me or through the head office. It goes through the divisional level. And I'm sure if you go through the paperwork, it will be shown very clearly how the process worked and where the decisions were taken. It's not an arbitrary decision. They had then convinced themselves that the ability of LMT, which was the Denel subsidiary, to do the work was not there because it was compromised by the quality of work, the quality of the steel, and that the Defence Force was actually complaining about their inability to perform on the contractual obligations that they had. And having gone through that process, he then signed off on it himself. I mean, I have never signed off on that. So I deny that I had put any kind of pressure on it because it had nothing to do with group level.
There are documents that you have next to your papers. Shall we get to them later? Would you rather go to them now? That's
which one?
the letters and the MOU and the MOA.
Okay, but we're coming to that now.
We'll come to that a little later. Can I say this, though, that in fairness to what you've just said, my reading of the same statement that I have quoted to you, Stefan Berger's statement, is that he also says that you supported LMT to getting the work and doing the work internally. So there's a little bit of a contradiction there that I quite frankly couldn't quite understand. But maybe Mr. Berger will come and give evidence and clarify whether he was saying you supported him. LMT, which was an internal organization within Denel, or whether you said to them, give this work to VR Laser. There's a little bit of a contradiction there. And I think I must point it out, seeing that I'm the one who's raised the issue of the statement, to say even in that statement, there's no real clarity as to what you're supposed to have said or done. But please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. So that was towards the end of 2014, and so nothing is happening. And that was a divisional level issue. It was contracted at divisional level. It's normal course of business. It's not...
Can you just explain how you got to know about the conclusion of the VR Laser deal?
I was informed by the COO, Jan Wessels.
Wessels, thank you. Please continue with paragraph 73.
So, sorry, I thought we dealt with that contract.
Yeah, you long dealt with 73.
Oh, yes.
I think go to the...
Please continue.
Okay, so that was the end November 2014. In April of 2015, Berger, as the CEO of Denel Land Systems, sent me correspondence requesting that they wanted to appoint VR Laser as a strategic supplier of fabricated products. I was assured by Berger that they were convinced that in terms of price, quality, and performance, and the preference of what they call the original equipment manufacturer, which is a Finnish company called Patria, which is the original manufacturer of these vehicles, and then we've manufactured under license here, that they had supported this as well. And because of the quality of the product that VR Laser was manufacturing to, the standard to which they were manufacturing to, that they would like to conclude a strategic partnering agreement. And I'll come back to what their motivation was. they then conducted their own internal process, being led by their own internal team, meaning the CEO of Denel Land Systems, the entire executive, and the procurement department. Okay. We were not involved in this process from Denel executive level, at group level. When they concluded this process, Berger came to me with a recommendation to appoint VR Laser as a strategic supplier and asked to engage in signing an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, to give effect to this. I will say now that after having considered all the facts before me, had approved and signed off on them engaging with VR Laser on a Memorandum of Understanding, based on the objective facts that were on the table. So as I've said in '79, it was on their recommendation that I signed off on this request together with the Denel Chief Operating Officer at that point, Jan Wessels. And those attachments are attached there, so...
Can I please ask you to actually go to them and just very quickly summarize the content for the chairman? You'll find them in file B, so it's Exhibit W4B, and the page number is 293. So they are marked as 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4 on the flags that are there.
Yes.
If you could briefly take the chairman through what it is
Just
you understood
so
you were signing off on.
Thanks, Advocate Chapas. So this is a letter to me. It is not actually the MOU, okay? And it says, MOU with VR Laser for supply of fabricated structures. And it goes the exceptional growth and the number of key current and future large programs in DLS, that's Denel Land Systems, has necessitated the business to reassess our relationship with key and strategic industry partners, considering critical parameters such as sustainable industry development, including unique capabilities, commercial and technical requirements, enterprise development, geopolitical considerations, and BBBEE objectives. It goes on further to say, it is clear that the direction and example is set by Royfalk is also relevant to major programs in TLS. Therefore, categorizing the relevant supplier industry and establish associate customized agreement in the following categories, which will be followed by DLS. So it goes and breaks it down to strategic with the OEM, segment with OEM, meaning in the industry itself, strategic supply of core subsystems at a technical level, so that's at the lower level, and normal procurement with operational requirements, which is general procurement. Evaluating the subcontracting structures of Hoefyster and AV8, it is important to note that given that these two major programs were activated more than 10 and 3 years ago respectively, industry partner decisions evolved in a way not ideal to today's perspective. Anyway, Chair, if you don't mind, I'm going to go through the other critical elements instead of reading the whole thing.
Yes, that's fine.
So essentially what they were saying is that the issue of supplying the fabricated hulls was what in the defense environment we call mission critical, okay? Because these are combat vehicles, and if they are ever in a combat situation, in a war situation, the quality of the product, the integrity of the steel, it has to match to a certain standard, or people's lives will be killed. So if I have to give you a typical example, if you want to manufacture 10 vehicles, which are fighting vehicles, which will be used in actual combat, if I give one company 3 vehicles to do, if I give another company 3 vehicles to do, and another company 4 vehicles, or 4 vehicles to do, you cannot guarantee that each company will produce those mission-critical systems at exactly the same level, with exactly the same quality, with exactly the same welding experience. So if anything does go wrong, you cannot ensure the integrity of the entire fleet of vehicles. That was one of their motivating factors here. And it also has a significant cost implication. Because if you have one manufacturing facility, you only have one set of tools, and jigs and everything that they use to produce that vehicle, as opposed to replicating it in 3 or 4 different facilities. So that is the motivation, and they had asked to engage in an MOU with VR Laser, and it was signed off by Berger, Jan Wessels, the COO, and myself after having considered all the technical arguments that was there. And remember, this was a request to enter into a MOU. It's not a contract, it is not an agreement, as we'll come to in a short while.
Except, of course, if you look at page 294, Mr. Salucci,
Yes.
the second last line mentions an MOA. I'm sorry, it's not very legible because of the blue coloring. But there's the introduction of an MOA will be balanced and protect long-term best interest of both companies. How did you interpret that sentence?
Chair, my own view is that that was a typographical error. It should not have been an MOA. It was probably going to have to be consistent with the document which says MOU.
Then the next issue I will raise is, of course, this particular project is one that LMT could have done as well as VR Laser.
Yes.
And explain to the chairman what your preference would have been, because that was part of the debate you had with Berger, and why you would have had that preference.
Chair, in this instance, I would have been of the view, because the equipment to manufacture the hulls would have been the same in LMT and in VR Laser. And in terms of the issues around integrity, and that I do believe that between the two suppliers, given their track record and their performance, that it could have been split between the two organizations. And this is what I had argued with Berger as well, notwithstanding the mission critical issues that I've just referred to. The problem was that LMT, even at that point, was having a significant problem in terms of its delivery of its contractual obligations to the National Defence Force. So they had a contract for some ambulances which they were not performing on as well. Okay. The integrity of the steel that they were using was not up to standard according to the National Defence Force as well. And when we investigated, when the reports came, it demonstrated that this was the case. So DLS and Berger in this instance had some merit in saying that they did not want to go with LMT, notwithstanding that I had asked them to consider the possibility. And that's why they motivated for this one.
In fact, there's also a view that VR Laser put in an unsolicited bid for this piece of work. So it's not a piece of work that went out to tender. They actually, it would appear, offered to do the work.
Sorry, Edward Tabashe, which one are you referring to?
The VR Laser. VR Laser doing the work for DLS, the house.
But that was the original one in 2013.
Was that the original one in 2013?
This is a completely separate issue, this.
To that particular one?
Yes, because that was concluded through the tender process and whatever else.
Maybe if you take us through to documents at 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4, things will become a little clearer, because there you've got MOUs annexed in relation to, MOAs, I beg your pardon, annexed in relation to what exactly did
So,
happen.
Chair, this document that I signed off was to say that you are free to engage in establishing, go and explore the possibility of establishing an MOU which will set the basis of a relationship based on the technical recommendations and operational requirements that you have set here.
Okay, so we look at 4.2 at page 297.
So that was the letter that was sent to me. But, Chair, of interest, if you look at on page 297, there is a similar letter that was addressed to me, but it's dated the 16th of April. The letter that was sent to me...
It's at 297.
Yes.
While the
Yes,
chairman is
carry on.
looking, just give him the date of the first letter
The
that
first
is on
letter-
293.
The first letter, Chair,
At 293.
was dated, I think, was the 22nd of April.
Thank you.
And that was the letter that was sent to me, which I've just read from. But if you go to 297, there is a similar letter that is dated the 16th of April.
So about a week before, certainly
Yes.
a few days before you got your letter.
And if you go carefully through the letter that was sent to me is couched in more strategic terms with regard to the strategic value of doing a partnering agreement with Realize. This was merely a technical agreement, okay? And it had a lot of technical issues here. It did not contextualize the strategic value of entering into an agreement with Realize. And if you look at the signatories on that second page, 298, it is Berger and Nchepe. Okay. So a week before this letter was amended and brought to me, they had already proposed to themselves that this is what they're going to bring to me.
But the important point, as I read the last paragraph on page 298, is that, again, they were talking about a memorandum of understanding, not a memorandum of agreement.
It's not a memorandum of agreement. Then if you turn the page, you'll find that there is a memorandum of agreement and not a memorandum of understanding, which was signed by Stefan Berger. Just trying to see the date.
It is on page 300.
On the 8th of May. So on the 8th of May, DLS, Stefan Berger, and VR Laser, and the CEO at that point in VR Laser is P. van der Merwe, signed this agreement, regularizing the agreement or the relationship between Tenel Land Systems and VR Laser.
Mr. Saluji, if you go to page 307, which is the signature page, just have a look at the date that this agreement
So it's actually the 19th of May.
Thank you.
So this was a whole month after the initial letter that was sent to me, where we had given them the authorization to enter into an MOU. And this was signed off at divisional level. It was not signed off at my level or at the group level.
Now we go to page 312.
So what is interesting, Chair, is that if you go to 312, this is well after my departure and suspension in December of that year. VR Laser and Denel Vehicle Systems, which was the new name of the LSSA BAE systems. So this was in December 2015. They then, under Berger again and DLS, signed an not Berger, the new CEO of Denel Vehicle Systems, Johan Stein, signed a similar agreement with VR Laser for a different entity of Denel. So what it shows is that the relationship with VR Laser continued well after my suspension.
And when you say similar, you're just underscoring the point that this is a completely different agreement, but it's a mirror image of the provisions
If you
in
read
the other one.
Advocate Chapas, it's almost exactly the same. So it was a cut and paste exercise, except it was with a different entity of Denel.
Yes.
So if we continue,
Yes, we're back at page 18 of your statement.
so as I'd indicated, that was the process we had gone through, and I've taken you through the different documents to show what was the chronological order in which this was done. Now remember, this is 2015 when they've signed this agreement, and towards the end of 2015, Chair. It was then coming to June 2015 and July when the AGM was supposed to take place. Okay. I had already ensconced myself in preparing for the AGM because it is a huge process. Together with the company secretary and the CFO, Willem Tlonto, we are primarily responsible for preparing the documentation for the board pack and the AGM and the report that you have seen there. And that occupies your time probably for the 2 months prior to the thing. So whilst we were preparing for this and preparing for the end of the term of the new board, expecting old board, expecting a new board to come in, these activities were going on. So that was in May of 2015. I must also just say that I have mentioned something else which is of some relevance. Tabashi, can I go ahead with it?
Please do.
Okay. And this was quite strange to me, that whilst all of this was going on, I had a few interactions and phone calls from the Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises as well, Pulenani Magbanishe, inquiring as to whether these agreements with VR Laser have been signed. Okay. And there again, I said to him, I can only sign off on that letter if it has been recommended to me through the process by the TLS management. Okay. And I did not put a lot of store by it because he often used to ask about what's happening with the business and whatever else. But it is noteworthy that there was specific mention of this particular agreement. Okay.
Oh, but was it usual for a deputy minister or even a minister to have an interest in a specific agreement that Denel was entering? Was that normal?
No, it wasn't normal for a specific agreement.
And you're saying that he constantly called you. How many, just estimate how many telephone calls you would have received from the deputy minister?
Over that period, because it took a long time for us to conclude that initial letter that I had signed off on. And that was, I think, part of the frustration, because I said that unless you come with a proper justification, there is no way that you can go ahead with this thing. Okay. So it took almost 2 months to 6 weeks for them to finally come to a position where they could come and present something. And it was over that period, I would imagine, once every 2 weeks or so. It was once every 2 weeks he used to phone.
And just on this particular topic, or would you also explore other matters that Denel was busy with? I'm talking about these specific telephone calls now.
No, there were, because, I mean, he's also responsible for overseeing the corporate social responsibility programs and transformation programs in the organization. And yes, included in that discussion was about what progress we were making with other issues with regard specifically to his interest in corporate social responsibility, helping communities, helping schools, disadvantaged schools, and whatever else.
I'm curious, was the transaction with VR Laser considered to be a BBEEE, whatever?
No, it wasn't.
Transaction?
Chair, it wasn't.
Was ESSA's company, VR Laser, as it then was constituted, considered to be
No, Chair, it wasn't.
And wait, let me finish. Considered to be a entity that required the application of the BBBEE criteria?
No, it was not.
Okay. And you were assured of that when you discussed these matters with your executives? That they weren't considering it to be one of those companies that needed to be given some kind of a leg up only because they had been part of a disadvantaged group of business people?
No, it would have been part of the normal procurement process in terms of what score they had with regard to their BEE card and whatever else. It wasn't that it was specifically cited or identified as a target for corporate social responsibility.
Continue.
Okay, so I dealt with all of this, and at this point I had immersed myself in preparing for the AGM, the incoming new board. And from this point onwards, Chair, I think it's important to note that come May 2015, Inchepe then became the primary driver with ESA and whatever. I had stopped any contact with them. Okay.
I would also just like you to briefly explain the signature of a memorandum of agreement in circumstances where the MOU was still outstanding. I mean, you had given them a particular task, and yet they went beyond the task you'd given them.
I mean, it's...
And went to the next level.
They had to. I mean, it was a contradiction in terms of the process itself.
Continue. You're at 82.
So, now here's the issue.
Just 1 second. Thank you. You may proceed, Ms. Robashe.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chair.
Saluji, you were explaining.
Chair, so now here's where things become interesting and a bit complicated. Well, not complicated, it becomes clear. It's complicated clear, if I want to put it that way. As I'd indicated earlier, the blacklisting in India from a judicial perspective were lifted in late 2014, but we could not continue doing business there until all the paperwork and administrative instruments were put in place so that we could then officially start doing business in India again. Okay. But it was coming to that point in any event. I think Advocate Abashe said that the administrative process was concluded.
The criminal investigation was concluded in 2014, and
then
South Africa was cleared
Yes.
at the end of that criminal investigation.
So, and I've not been talking to Inchepe about VR Laser ESA or anything throughout this period, okay, because my focus was now away from this matter. But in June of 2015, Inchepe comes to me on his own, okay, and he says he'd like to talk to me about Asia. And he says he believes and is convinced that VR Laser is the ideal partner for Denel to establish a footprint in Asia Pacific. Okay. And also specifically to open the Indian market after the unbanning or lifting of the blacklisting. And he also indicated that this was the intention of ESA and the Guptas as a business proposal to Denel.
Now again, Mr. Saluji, was this a formal or an informal report? I mean, did he approach you and say, I've got documentation, et cetera, in support of
No,
this
Chair.
proposal?
It was a discussion he requested with me, an informal discussion over the weekend, and he came to see me at my house to discuss it with me.
What was the purpose of that approach to you? What was he trying to say to you, or what authority was he trying to get from you?
My own view is that I think if he had got my support for that, the old board's term was coming to an end, the new board was coming, and that if I had agreed, he was going to take that proposal formally then to the new board as one of the first action items for the new board to consider. I mean, that, Chair.
You say if you had supported the idea,
Yeah.
you think that he would have taken that to the old board before the new board
No,
came
he would
in,
not
or
have
you-
taken. I would
or
be
he would
very
take it to
surprised.
the new
He
board.
would take it to the new board.
Okay.
Because he obviously knew something about what was going to transpire. Okay. As it transpired after my suspension, and we don't have to obviously go into the whole Denel Asia thing, but it is well documented what happened there. I think the Minister of Public Enterprises, the current minister, had addressed it in his testimony as well. As it transpired after my suspension, the joint venture between Denel and VR Laser was established, but was not given formal approval by Treasury and the Finance Department to go ahead with it. But at that meeting, when he came to me, I said to him in no uncertain terms and categorically,
Him being in Chairper.
in Chairper,
Thank you.
that this would not happen, and he must convey this in no uncertain terms to ESSA as well. Chair, if I may indulge, it became quite a heated argument, and I actually don't want to use the language, but I swore at him to just go away.
Between the two of you?
Yes, yeah,
On that occasion?
on that occasion.
Because he was he quite adamant? He was pushing
Yes,
this
you know,
idea.
and I said to him, nobody in there, again, I don't want to use the language, but
Yeah,
the fact is that I told him that it is not going to be acceptable,
Yeah.
and it is really,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
a no-go
yes.
area.
Okay.
And I told him to convey this to ESSA in no uncertain terms as well.
This is June now, 2015.
Yeah, middle of June 2015.
Yes.
And the new board is coming in July the 24th, the following month.
And as at the time of this meeting between yourself and Mr. Nchepe, was it known that the old board, what yesterday was referred to as the 2011 board, the old board was not going to continue, was at that stage?
Chair, I believe at that point there were already discussions and people had informed us that there will be a new board that was coming in. And
Okay.
if I recall properly, there was interaction between the previous chairperson of the board,
Yes.
Martie Jansen van Rensburg, and the minister about this particular issue in terms of the renewal of the board.
Okay.
I think she alluded to it in
Yes.
her testimony as well.
Yes, okay.
So then he went away. And even at that point, I knew for a fact that the old board, there was no decision either at the executive level or at the board level to establish any kind of presence in Asia.
It wasn't part of your corporate plan. It wasn't part of your strategy.
If you go through all the documents that you have seen, the corporate plan and the business plan and the strategy, it has not been mentioned in any of those documents.
So on what basis did Mr. Nchepe think that he could come to you with a proposal that was not backed by paper, by any analysis, by any data of any kind?
Chair, I think he wanted to sound me out. And if I had said yes, then they would have started going through the formal process, I think, in preparation for the new board when it came in.
Okay, so he didn't want to bother to do all the paperwork only to find out later that you didn't support the whole idea. So you wanted to establish if you would be in support and then work on paperwork thereafter.
Absolutely, Chair. And I think that was a defining moment in what happened to myself and my colleagues, Elizabeth Africa and Fikile Mhlonto, who at this point were extremely diligent and amazing in terms of the support that they had given me in terms of preparing. I mean, they were professional. They were on the ball with all the level and the quality of the inputs for the board preparation, the AGM documents, the board packs. And I have to at this point also say, without them, it would have been very difficult to manage from my position that whole process. You know.
Yes, your two colleagues who were ultimately
Absolutely.
suspended with
they
you.
were sterling, really.
Yes, yes. So you parted with Mr. Nchepe on the clear understanding that the two of you were too far apart on this issue. You were opposed and he wanted it and you were opposed.
Absolutely, Chair. And there was no question of debating this issue because I was the group CEO. And I said to him very clearly that this is not going to happen. Okay.
Now, ordinarily, and you might not have had any experience of this, ordinarily, if an idea such as this one of Denel Asia had come about in circumstances where it was not part of any corporate plan that was existing, what would have been done if the aim was to incorporate it and to pursue it?
Chair, first of all, it would have had to go through
in terms of process.
Process, yes. So it would be part of our strategic planning process that we normally do when we look at markets and where we want to do business. we would identify it as a geopolitical region where we want to do business. There had to be an analysis by the people who work in business development, because we do have analysts there who go and identify through open sources, through their own intelligence, through their own information, what are the programs and in which countries, and again, in the countries that we can work with legally, obviously, because South Africa has a regime which says that it is only in these countries that you can work. So in Southeast Asia, for example, we will not be able to work in Myanmar, for example. Okay. So they would then come and present to the business development executive, in this instance, for example, in Chepe, if it fitted in with their vision and strategy of building the business going forward, he would then come and bring it to the EXCO. The EXCO would debate it and discuss, and if we had agreed, we would say, okay, go ahead and explore it. And then he would come back and say, I've explored it, and I believe these are the entities that we should be working with, and this is the rationale and logic behind why we should work with these entities, whether it is a local entity based in South Africa and an international entity based in the country or the target country. Now, here's the interesting thing. Denel, and that is my firm view, would never have used a local company in South Africa to do business outside of its borders, because normally we would partner with companies that are located and based in those countries.
Who would know the situation.
Who would know
there.
the situation, who are indigenous to that country. Okay. So it just didn't make sense. And that was my response.
So if you had been supportive of the idea when Mr. Nchepe approached you in June, ultimately that's the process that would have been followed, that you have just outlined?
The process would have been followed, and if I believed in the business case,
yes,
I would have myself taken it and supported it.
Yes. But it would have taken quite a long period before you actually, the work that would have had to be done and the process that would have had to be followed would have meant quite some time that it would take before you could, get to the signing of agreements and looking at actually implementing anything.
You're correct, Chair. I mean, these processes don't take place overnight. I mean, it's months of preparation, firstly. And in this instance, it would have had to go through the entire governance process of DPE. Again, like we did with the LSSA transaction. It would have had to go DPE, it would have had to go to Treasury, to Finance.
Yes.
It would have had to go through all the processes and come back down.
Yes.
With an approval or no approval.
Yes.
Because it was based on the business case. If there was no business case with clear specific numbers which were quantified, what investment was required, how you were going to fund this initiative, who were the partners and what was the due diligence done. I mean, it was a whole spectrum of things that you had to go through.
What's your estimate of how many months it probably would have taken?
Because this was a joint venture, not an acquisition, it probably could have taken anything from 8 months upwards.
Okay, thank you.
So that was then the end of my discussions around this particular matter. And then things obviously changed completely because we were busy with the appointment of the new board in July 2015. Denel's the existing board's tenure was coming to an end, and there was, from what we were told, a process underway to appoint a new board.
Did you have any ideas to who had been nominated to sit on the new board?
Not at that point.
There was no talk in the Denel corridors about the people who they thought might be your new board of directors?
Not that it came to my personal knowledge, but I think rumors were flying about the fact that it will be a new board. Okay, it won't be the old board.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So in early July, okay, the 23rd of July is the AGM, where the old board is thanked by the minister for what they've done, and she thanked them profusely about the good job that they've done and whatever else, and then she announced the new board. Okay. But just before that process happened, okay, Nchepe comes to me and says, ESSA wants me to meet the new chairperson of the new board, the incoming chairperson.
This is, yes, continue.
Well, I thought you wanted to ask a certain question.
I was going to, Chairman, but I thought I should allow him to give his evidence without prompting him.
Okay, all right, yes.
Okay. And by this time, even though it wasn't made public because it was already late in July, we had already been informed who the members of the new board were going to be.
Or you had been informed already?
Yeah, because it was very close to the AGM. Because
Yes.
Elizabeth Africa, the company secretary, had to start preparing the documentation.
Yes.
Because you can't have a new board coming in and no signatory authorizations, no resolution,
Yes.
no mandate to sign resolutions or anything of that sort. So she was given the names of the new board.
Yes. I think Mrs. Janse van Rensburg, if I could remember correctly, said the AGM was on the 23rd of July.
That's correct, Chairman.
23rd of July.
And then the induction of the new board was on the 24th of
Yeah,
July.
the following day.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm just mentioning that so that as you tell us the timelines, you see whether you are in agreement with that.
Yes, Chair. So just before the AGM and that sometime in early July, by the time that we had already been told who the new board was, Nchepe comes to me and he says to me that ESSA has asked to meet with me in order to introduce me to the new chairperson of the board.
So this is a time when you within Denel have been informed who the members of the new board are, but it has not been publicly announced.
It's not been publicly announced.
Okay, all
That's
right.
correct.
Didn't you find it strange that Mr. Nchepe would be the person who's come to tell you that he would like to take you to the new chairman of the board?
Chair, because at this point he was the person who was driving that relationship. I had nothing to do with that.
But I may have misunderstood. I thought your evidence was that Mr. Nchepe said Mr. ESSA would like to introduce the new chairperson or the chairperson of the new board to you. In other words, my understanding is that it's not like it was Mr. Nchepe's idea that you should meet the new chairperson. I thought he was a messenger.
No, Chair, maybe we
maybe
misunderstood one another.
Yes.
Nchepe had asked that ESSA had asked me to attend the meeting to introduce me.
Yes, no, I think that was my understanding.
Yes.
So in effect, Mr. Nchepe had been sent by Mr. ESSA to ask you to go and meet, have a meeting where he, that is Mr. ESSA, would introduce the chairperson of the new board to you.
Precisely.
Okay.
In fact, I must apologize.
Yeah.
I got the names mixed up, Chairman. So the way you've reframed it is
Yes,
correct.
Yes.
But I
Okay.
will still ask the question, but using the correct names this time. Is it not strange, or was it not strange to you at the time, that Mr. ESSA, who had nothing to do with Denel other than that he was a shareholder in VR Laser, would be the person who now is wanting to introduce you to your new chairman? You know, the same people introduced you to your new minister. Now you have him introducing you to your new chairman. Strange coincidence.
Advocate Kabashi, you're absolutely right. I mean, I was perplexed at some level, and I was angry, actually, that this could happen again.
Well, he introduced you to your political principal, Mr. Kikaba. He introduced you to the former president's son, and he introduced you to the Gupta family, as I understand it, although you might have, I don't know, bumped into some of them in public places. And now he wanted to introduce you to the chairperson of the new board.
Yes, Chair.
That's the sequence.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Would it, or I should rephrase that, did it not cross your mind that you should just call Mr. Mancha directly and say, you're going to be my new chairman, can we have a cup of coffee? And just avoid the ESSA issue completely.
Well, I could respond in 2 ways, Chapas. The one is that when he says I've got to come and meet with the incoming chairperson, there's obviously an agreement that the chairperson has acquiesced to this meeting. And the second thing is that he is the new chairperson. If I was going to work with him, I can't start off on the footing where I pick up the phone and say to him, I've got this thing, but I don't think, it was a personal choice I made to say that I have to go and see this new chairperson.
Yes.
Did you add, you have not finished?
No, I'm finished.
You're finished. What did you make of the fact that from what you were told by Mr. Nchepe, you deduced that the chairperson of the new board was agreeable to you being introduced to him by Mr. Essa?
There's only one explanation, Chairperson, is that they had an understanding.
Yes.
So, like I say, just before the AGM and just before the induction of the new board on the 24th of July, and it was maybe a week or 2 before that, I met with Essa and Nchepe and the new chairman, Mancha, in Melrose out at JB Rivers. Okay. So, and I remember it very clearly because it was a Saturday morning, it was freezing cold because it was in July, so it stood out in my memory. But at that meeting, Essa introduced me to Mancha, I introduced myself to him, and he asked me to give him a quick overview of Denel and what's going on. It was literally a 10-minute overview. And when I was finished with that, I said to him very, very specifically, when I'd concluded, that any work, again, that has to be done with Denel must be done with due process. As I said it specifically for the benefit of Essa who was there.
To indicate that your stance had not changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you see in my statement, what I've said to him very specifically is that you, as the new chairperson, you've got to protect Denel and you've got to protect me. Okay. Because we want to do business in the right way. I need to concentrate on building the business, making it sustainable, making it profitable. And I cannot have undue influence and interference in the business of this nature. Okay. And I said to him.
You said this at the meeting?
At the meeting. And he confirmed to me that he was exactly of the same view.
That is Mr. Mancha?
Yes.
Yes.
And that he supported me 100% in terms of the fact that I need to concentrate, and he will deal with other issues.
Yeah, and were you relieved to hear that?
And I said, this is welcome. But at the same time, Chair, I have to say I was skeptical. Because there was Essa right there.
Yes.
So,
Yes, and you knew you had some interactions with him.
So, it was clear to me at that point that I don't think, in fact, not much would change, it would get worse.
Can I ask you this? Did Mr. Essa make any contribution at all to the discussions at that meeting?
No, Chair. The only thing he did was to introduce me to the new chairman.
What about Mr. Nchepe?
Nobody. I did the talking. And I said to the chairman, the new incoming chairman, that this is what I think your approach should be, and this is what I would expect from you as the chairman coming in.
You didn't ask the chairman why he didn't phone you directly. Say, Mr. Chairman, you could have called me. I would happily have taken your call.
No, Chair, I did not. I did not.
Because then that cuts out the middleman.
It would have, yes, Advocate Chapas.
And
Please
how
continue.
long did that meeting take?
Probably because I'd given the briefing for about 10, 15 minutes. Then I spoke to him in terms of what I've just said for another 10 minutes or so. So probably about half an hour, 40 minutes.
Yeah. And in your own mind, did you conclude anything about why it was important that one, you be introduced to the chairperson of the new board by Mr. Essa, two, at this venue where this happened? Did you form any view as to what was at play here in that context?
Chair, I must say that after the meeting, my mind was in a state of flurry. I mean, it was going all over the place because of a number of things. The one, it was clear that the appointment, in this instance of the chairperson, was a continuation of what was taking place or trying to take place. And if this new board came, it would complete that cycle of wanting to then dominate that space completely. It was also, I mean, I also, for the first time, thought to myself, if I can continue in this vein, you know. And I could see that things were coming to a head because Nchepe now had his own relationship. The fact that he was bringing messages constantly to me from ESSA with regard to VR Laser Asia, with the meeting here with this chairman. So it did occur to me that there was a fundamental shift that's taking place in Tenel now.
Can I ask you this? There is a report, of course, by Amabungani. It's in Exhibit W5B at page 135 that says that
At what page?
page 1, I beg your pardon, Chairman, it's 215. There are two numbers there, but the one we are using is 215. Exhibit W5.
W4B.
5, Chairman, it's the reference file.
Oh.
And B.
Page 215,
Chairman.
thank you.
And
Yes.
are you at page 215, paginated paper, the top number?
215, yes.
215, sir. Paragraph 4 says that you were warned that you would be pushed out now.
Sorry, Advocate Kabash. I've got 215 here.
Exhibit
Just check if you have got the right
Exhibit
file.
5. You're number 4, but 5 is the
I've got
reference.
5B here.
Excellent. Then
Yeah.
you'll find it.
Then-
If you go up to page 215, below it there's another number, 135. But right to the top, there's the number 215.
So there are two numbers on the right-hand corner, top corner, but look at the first one from the top, which is 215.
Ref
Okay, yeah,
file
I've got it there.
215.
Yeah.
Here it is said that you had been warned that you're going to be pushed out, and that the warning allegedly came from Denel board member Nkopane Sparks Mutseki, etc., etc. The question really is, in what you were considering, in all the things that were happening, what compounded this, possibly, was the fact that you had heard that your days were numbered anyway. There were people who didn't want you in Denel. Would this be correct?
Advocate Kabash, you are absolute chair. I think the company secretary, even though I come from the military, sometimes she has a better ability to gather information. And she had specifically said to me that she had heard, in fact she had heard from Mr. Mutseki, that this new board, when it comes in, that my days specifically were numbered, and that it also included Mr. Mhlonto at that point.
And
But, sorry, Chair, if I may just, I mean, there was always speculation about when the new board comes in, how is it going to deal with the executives based on what has happened in the past? And at the back of my mind, I was not surprised when a rumor like that was doing the rounds of the corridor.
Please just repeat that. There was always what?
No, I'm saying that there was always, with all the things that had transpired,
Yes.
and specifically towards the end.
It was the end of the term of the old board. Yeah.
And I also know that it was difficult for whoever, whether it was ESA or the Guptas, to get rid of me,
Yes.
as long as the old board was there.
Because
The old board had supported me 100%.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So as long as that board was in place,
Yes.
it would have been very difficult for them to justify getting rid of me.
Oh.
Okay, and that's why it took much longer. Earlier you had mentioned that when the threat was made to Tema Maseko, it took 3 months and then they got rid of him. With me, it took much longer, precisely because that board was in place.
Yes. Yes.
So if they needed to get rid of me, they needed to get rid of the board as well.
Yes.
Because I cannot believe that the old board would have countenanced them wanting to get rid of me.
Yes, especially in the light of the performance of the company under your leadership
Yes, Chair.
that we heard about yesterday. Yeah.
So, Chair,
Okay.
just
But let's go back to what you say the company secretary told you.
so the company secretary, I mean, she said very specifically that she was informed by Mr. Mutseki that this new board is going to come in and some of the executive, and specifically myself in Mhlonto, would not survive this new board.
Okay. And how long in relation to, or how long before the new board came in was it when she told you that?
It was like probably a week, 2 weeks before that.
Okay. Okay.
In fact, the report on the same page, Mr. Saluji, the third paragraph from the bottom, says that you were suspended 3 months later for unspecified infractions.
Yeah, I've just closed that one.
But that's fine. So it's somewhere between 2 weeks and 3 months. I'm
Yeah.
simply saying that's what the reporters say. You may well be right in saying about 2 weeks. I'm just pointing out that they say 3 months later.
Well,
you
they
were
must
out.
have had some sources, Chair, which had given them information to the effect that it was way in advance of what I'm saying.
Yes.
So that there had already been some premeditated view on what was going to happen.
So looking at the time frame, it would probably have been around June that Elizabeth Africa got that telephone call or that message, because then it would have been July, August, September you were out. 3 months later,
Yes.
you were out of the system. You were suspended. Yes, but please continue. We're just going to summarize
So
what you have
then
at
the
paragraph
next-
92.
Yeah, we are at 92 now.
Yes.
So, Chair, you had asked me earlier what was my impression. I mean, and I had given
Yes.
a very clear view that it was to continue the process of making an intervention into denial. When I say intervention, you could interchange that with state capture if you want to.
Did you, at any stage prior to the new boards coming in, and after you had had your first interactions with Mr. Essa, did you at any stage become aware of any attempts that may have been made to approach the board or some members of the board, that is now the old board, to see whether they would agree to certain things, just like some people like you were being approached to discuss certain things?
Chair, not to my knowledge.
Nothing ever came to your attention along those lines? Okay.
Please
So-
continue.
So the next significant thing was the meeting of the Denel AGM on the 23rd of July. In this meeting, Brown thanked the outgoing board and announce the appointment of the new board. And for the purpose of interest, I think it is important that we note some of the composition of the new board, because it is pertinent to what we are discussing here today. From the previous board, there was only one individual who was retained on the new board, and that was Johannes Sparks Mutseki,
Yes.
who Kabashi has just said was the one who had informed Elizabeth Africa about the fact that we were going to be gotten rid of.
Yes.
In addition to that, which was also strange because, I mean, there was no real value add, from my perspective, of Mr. Mutseki to the board throughout the tenure that he had with the previous board.
Well, I was about to ask what your experience was of him at meetings of the board over the time that you had been there.
No, I mean, my experience was that there was no fundamental or substantive contribution. Then if you look at some of the other appointees, I'm not going through all of them, but just out of note, there was amongst others Tamim Somi, who was Minister Gigaba's legal advisor and chief of staff. Tau Mahu Mapela, who was the brother of the Premier of the Northwest. Refilwe Mukwena, who is now the suspended legal head of SARS. So these were some of the people who had been appointed to the new board, including, of course, Daniel Mancha. So that all went off well in the sense that the old board was thanked, they left, and she announced it. So on the 24th was the induction of the new board, where Brown convened the meeting and presented her strategic intent statement. It was not fundamentally different from what you see in the report. It just said, continue with the good work. She's very proud of Denel. Denel is one of the best, is the best performing SOC. We've met significantly most of our targets in terms of the shareholders' compact, and she only had good things to say. If I recall, in her oral presentation, she said very clearly to that board that was coming in, do not interfere in the executive management and operations of the company. She made a mention of that.
And of course, you did testify earlier on, or is it something that, or maybe I think it's something that I read to which you are still going to come. Yeah, okay.
Might I just point out, Mrs. Saluji, that one of your annexures deals precisely with that. The address by the Minister to the board on the 24th of July, 2015. That's the new board when they came in. So it is something that you may want to deal with, just very briefly, as you speak.
Chair, that is the strategic intent statement. And essentially it was just reconfirming the growth path and where Denel was, and that we should continue on that path. When I got there, to encapsulate Denel's new strategy, I coined the term from good to great, okay? And that was the motto of Denel throughout the years that I was there. And it is what I had introduced into the company. I said, at the point at which I came, it was just becoming a good company, but we needed to take it to a great company. And in that induction of the new board, she said, we must continue on that path of going from good to great. Okay? So it wasn't anything fundamentally or mind-blowingly new in terms of what she had said to the...
But can I ask you just to pause for a minute to reflect on a proposition I want to put to you? The MOI at clause 18 stipulates that the Audit and Risk Committee is appointed by the Minister, but the board must propose first who should be members of that committee. So the board proposes, the Minister appoints. Now, what happened on the 24th of July when the Minister met with the new board is she appointed an Audit and Risk Committee. Now, that again seems a bit of a malalignment because the board as a board would not have had the opportunity to sit and decide on who was best suited for the role of member of the Audit and Risk Committee. Because you've been a member of that board, because you've been a member of other boards, was this a regular way of doing things?
Chair, I mean, as I said in paragraph 95, at the meeting of the 24th, the induction, the Minister announced the composition of the new board, Audit and Risk Committee, okay, which was Ms. Mpogo Mongo, Mr. Tamsanka Msomi, Mr. Taumau Mapela, and Ms. Kombutso Poppy Silence Nachaven. So as the MOI says, and Edward Kabash is completely right, is that when board committees are appointed, there's one committee that requires the shareholders' approval, and that's the Audit and Risk Committee. The other committees do not, the Social and Ethics Committee and the Personnel and Remuneration Committee do not need an explicit approval from the shareholder. But again, the process, from my understanding of the MOI, is that the board deliberates and they choose amongst themselves who they think is best suited for. It is then taken to the minister for approval. It's not as if the minister says that I've appointed this board and 1, 2, 3 will be audit committee members. Okay. So, and I say again, I stand to be corrected, but that's my interpretation. And here at this meeting, she had already announced the Audit and Risk Committee before the full board could apply its mind.
So this was an anomaly, really, because the board as a board had not sat yet.
From my understanding, it had not fully convened yet. So that's
but the process that the proposal must come from the board for this committee, of the members of the composition of this committee, that comes from what document or what instrument?
Chairman, if I might be of assistance. So we are looking at Exhibit W5A, W5A, which is again a reference bundle. And we are at page 35 of that reference bundle. And the clause is right at the bottom, clause 18, Audit and Risk Committee. The board shall propose and the shareholder shall appoint an Audit and Risk Committee, etc., etc.
So, Chair, if I may, that is exactly the process that should have been followed, but was not.
Yes, but what document, what instrument is this?
This is the memorandum of incorporation for Denel,
of the
Chairman.
company.
Yes, and it's the front
Yes.
page is on page 2
Yes,
of
okay,
that bundle.
Okay, okay. So now we know what the process was that was supposed to be followed before the committee was appointed. And what you have said is that that process did not happen in regard to the Audit and Risk Committee of the 2015 board.
Yes, Chair.
Because the appointment was announced before the board could propose names.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman?
Can we take comfort? I think members of the journalism profession, the media, are also feeling that there should be a comfort break. My own registrar also was indicating earlier on that it would be most welcome. There is a secondment. I think we should take some comfort break. But let's talk about where we are and where we want to be by the time we finish. Now, I know what the two of us discussed here at the hearing yesterday about trying to finish today, and we didn't want to take chances. I looked at the part 1 and part 2 of the statements, or the two statements. It seemed to me that it might not be possible to finish today, I'm not sure. But I certainly am prepared to sit longer noticed up to 5. But I was thinking that if we haven't finished by then, we might have to talk about whether we can, whether Mr. Saraji could come back on Friday. So maybe we should talk about that at 4:30, or are you able to say something now? And I'll hear.
Chairman, that's
Yes.
an incentive to finish at 5 o'clock. But I believe that we can work on something, because all the evidence you have heard
Yeah.
really led to part 2.
Okay,
So it's
yes.
easy to synthesize the evidence
Yes,
in
you
part
think
2.
we may finish?
I believe we can
Okay.
finish by 5
No,
o'clock,
that's fine,
Chairman.
that's fine. I wanted to have an idea what the situation is, and I see you have a secondment from Mr. Bam.
Mr. Chair, can I just say this, that I'm going to speak to Advocate Kabasha now.
Yes,
I've made a note of 8 points,
yes,
which I think will cover the essence of Part B.
Okay.
Of course, Advocate
Yes.
Kabasha will lead that.
yeah,
In my view,
We
it is
can
something which
finish.
can be done in about half an hour's time.
okay, no, that's fine.
But we'll
that's
discuss it
fine.
now.
Okay, no, that's fine. Mr.
Fortunate-
Saluji, you are happy for us to go up to 5 o'clock at least?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, no, that's fine. We'll take the, just a comfort break. Shall we revert at, okay, maybe let's say at 4 o'clock, so it gives us 15 minutes. We will resume at 4 o'clock. We adjourn.
I think this covers it, if you lead him.
proceed, Ms. Kabashe.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Salucci, are you ready? We're almost done with part one.
The desire that we finish by 5
I believe it can be executed.
should not mean that we don't do justice to his evidence in terms of what is still left. So we must still do justice, and I may be able to stay beyond 5 if need be. So let's carry on and just make sure that everything is done properly nevertheless. Okay.
It will do, Chairman. Mr. Saluji, we had just finished dealing with the appointment of the Audit and Risk Committee and the matters that you have dealt with on page 22. You may want to start at paragraph 96, which is the early September reference. Paragraph 96 on page 22. You need to switch your mic on.
Chairperson, so we obviously have gone through the 24th of July meeting, which was the induction of the new board, and then it was obviously trying to stabilize the business, continue as if the new board is in place, that business continuity must be there, we go on as normal. But sometime in early September 2015, this is after the induction of the new board.
Yes.
And the new chairperson is in place. Okay.
Yes. And this, would this have been before the new board's first meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
So, which is normal. I mean, CEOs or GCEOs of companies often get a call from the chairperson of the board.
Yes.
Say, come and brief me about this.
Yes.
And it could be at very short notice. And I mean, that's the manner in which
that's normal.
things operate. So I got a call from him early in September 2015 from Mancha, the chairperson of the board. He says he requested a briefing. He did not specify what briefing from me on some issues, and that I must drive from Denel in Pretoria, Centurion, and most likely the meeting would take place in offices. I think he said it was in Bryanston. So, I mean, I left the Denel campus in Centurion, and I was on my way to Johannesburg. He said he will give me directions as I'm closer to Johannesburg, where to come to his office. But as I was approaching Johannesburg, he called me and he said, he directed me again to the Gupta residence. Okay. Of course, when he did this, I was not surprised.
Yes.
Okay. Because, I mean, now I knew what was going on.
Yes.
So when I got there, it was him, Tony Gupta.
Almost every meeting that I've been told about involving government officials or ministers with the Gupta family, almost every meeting takes place in their residence in terms of those that I've heard about in this commission so far. So this one too.
So he didn't, like I say, Chair, it didn't surprise me. I mean, even so at the meeting were Tony Gupta, Essa, and of course Mancha. What I found interesting is that the only topic of conversation which was led by Tony Gupta was that they were interested in buying LMT, Landward Mobile Technologies, which is a subsidiary of Denel. Okay. I was amazed because they've already been involved in with VR Laser. There's been an issue about Denel Asia, and now they want to buy Landward Mobile Technologies. In essence, trying to consolidate the vehicle capability around themselves locally. And Mancha said, I've got to look into this matter. I indicate again that a transaction of this nature, particularly because it was a sell-off, is even more complicated because it has to have even more measures to ensure that the governance processes are in place. Again, due diligences, both technical, legal, financial. It has to go through the complete approval process. It has to go to the Competition Commission. It has to go to the Public Enterprises Ministry. And I said it will take some time. It would have to go through several processes. And that was it. I was quite surprised because that was the only topic of discussion, that they wanted to buy LMT.
What was Mr. Mancha's role at this meeting?
All he said to me was that when the meeting ended, he said that I must go and look into the matter and I must revert back to him on it.
Did it appear to you, did you get to understand why that meeting couldn't have taken place in his offices rather than the Gupta residence?
The impression I got is that when I got there, he was already having meetings with them there.
Yes.
And I was just joining at the tail end of something else.
Yes, okay.
Yes, continue.
But by then it was, when I left that meeting, it was clear in my mind that either this was not going to happen, it's just not possible, given all the things that have preceded.
Yes.
Where we are, new board, the Tenel Asia story. It was just the reputational issues. There is no way that something like this was going to happen.
Of course, this being 2015, about 2 years earlier, 2013, there had been the landing of the aircraft at Waterkloof. Those are all things that would have been known to you as they were known in the public domain.
You're completely right, Chair. So, it was, the situation was just becoming untenable, really. And I realized that, for the first time after I walked out of that meeting, is that this is now, it's the final leg of something going to happen, because that's the impression I got. It was what we call in the Air Force environment the last finals. It was.
But tell me, Mr. Saluji, back at paragraph 98, why didn't you simply say, we don't do things this way at Denel, Mr. Chairman? What you said was, and I'm reading from paragraph 98, you say you indicated that this would take time and that such a transaction would have to go through several processes. What stopped you from saying what you know you had in your mind? Your normal, constant refrain, you call it, proper, regular conduct.
Chair, as I've indicated in my statement here, that I indicated that it would take time and such a transaction would have to go through several processes. I knew if it had gone through those processes, there was no way it would pass muster. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I have said there, in the last sentence of my statement, that I personally had no intention of doing so.
So this was a diplomatic answer?
Absolutely.
Yes, please continue.
So then I'm probably going to skip some of this because I think otherwise we're not going to meet your deadline.
But can I ask, I beg your pardon.
Just remember that I said in the end, we must do justice to your evidence.
Okay.
So we strike a balance. Ms. Chapas, you wanted to say something?
Yes, Chairman, I was going to ask, Mr. Saluji, did you revert to Tony Gupta on this request that he had made with the chairman at that meeting?
Not at all.
Yes, please continue.
Well, not only did I not Chair, not only did I not revert back, but I had instituted no processes to even start the process.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
And of course, then I was suspended in September, so it was a moot point.
Yes, okay.
So very quickly, I think so they had scheduled, we had scheduled a quarterly board meeting for the 10th of, their very first board meeting, the new board, okay, on the 10th July, so it was less than a month.
Where was this meeting held?
This meeting was held at Tenel Land Systems, okay.
Yes,
which
that's
was-
Stefan Berger's outfit.
That's Stefan
Well, he
Berger.
headed that division.
Stefan Berger's outfit.
Didn't you find it curious that, or why, or was there a reason that you went across to Stefan Berger's outfit?
Well, the thing is that we normally rotate the board meetings and people offer, but in this instance, he was the first one to put his hand up, so he got the chance to host the meeting, okay. With hindsight, Chair, I'm not sure whether it was, it was planned that way, but in any event, I can't comment on that. But anyway, on the 9th of September, the Audit and Risk Committee called a special audit committee, specifically to look into the LSSA deal.
Yes.
They asked for all the documentation, they asked for the presentations. Mhlonto, myself, and Africa gave them the presentations and every single document that was pertinent to that transaction. Right from the pre-documentation, pre-notification that went to public enterprises and then to Treasury, to public enterprises approval, PFMA approval, Treasury approval, Reserve Bank approval, Competition Commission approval. Every single step of the process was documented and given to them. I'm not going to delve too much in that because it is well documented, and I think...
And yes, no, that's fine. And the previous board had approved that.
Absolutely, under the
Yes.
chairmanship of a committee of the previous chairperson. And I
Yes.
think the previous chairperson, Marty Janssen van Rensburg, spoke to this particular issue. So suffice to say that from our perspective, we had followed every single legal process.
Yes.
So I'm not going to go into, but they kept on harping on about this particular transaction, which was strange because from every single thing that we were doing in Tenel for the past 3-4 years, this was the issue that they had latched onto. The board convened its first board meeting on the 10th of September. As usual, I gave the executive report, Mhlonto gave the financial report, Wessels gave the operations report, and it was basically the quarterly report where we described the performance of that quarter, whether we've met budget for that quarter, and whether we're going to see the projections going to the end of the year, whether they are going to be in line with what the plan was. And of course, discussing the status of some of the key strategic projects that we were executing at that point. So it's an important meeting because it gives the board an opportunity to interrogate the performance of the executive and the performance of the organization in terms of its mandate. So to our surprise, it was, there was not much discussion on the report itself, okay? What was discussed was again the issue of Asia, okay?
Okay, thank you. Yes. Oh. Yes, we may proceed.
Can we continue, Chair?
Yes, yes.
So at that board meeting, the board, the new board, which you would have expected because none of them had the experience of what we were doing, would have interrogated in more depth the executive report. But they didn't, and a lot of discussion took place around the Asia issue and what is the plan for Asia. At the meeting, I said very specifically, and of course, some of the LSSA issues were also discussed there. So the two key issues for me there, amongst other things, was the Asia issue and the LSSA issue. So where they expressed dissatisfaction with some aspects of the LSSA transaction, but not in depth as well. And then on the Asia issue, they had asked that we need to look into expeditiously the setting up of a presence in Asia.
Yes.
So I had indicated to the board at that point at the board meeting on the 10th of September, again, we had to go through a proper analysis. The blacklisting had just been lifted. We have to develop and generate a strategy and an implementation plan that will speak to the business case and the whole thing. And that it will take a while, and it is a process. And when we are finished with that process, and I'll have consulted with the executives who are responsible, I will come back to the board and present them with the plan. In terms of timelines, I could not say, but I said it could take some time.
And this had been your stance to the knowledge of at least Mr. Essa and the Gupta family for a few years now, coming from the second meeting with them. Is that right, or am I mistaken?
You mean
in terms of saying due process is important, proper processes must be followed. It had been a few years since your second meeting at the Gupta family, isn't it?
Yes, Chair. And this was normal standard procedure in the organization.
Yes,
if the board wanted something done, I had to take it through the normal process in the organization.
Yeah. Okay.
So as I said, I think the issue of Asia was specifically also to look at how the Indian market could be opened. And I think that was really the target of this whole initiative. That's my view.
And how did the board meeting, how did that issue, what was the final decision of the board on that issue, if any decision was taken as to what should happen next in regard to it after you had expressed the views that you expressed?
Chair, after I had indicated to the board that this was what I will intervene, the intervention that we'll make, we'll do the analysis, we'll develop a strategy and implementation plan, a business case for getting into that region, and then come and present it, okay? You see in my document, I've said, my view in terms of how they responded, in terms of their body language, they were palpably unhappy with my response.
Okay.
But no further discussion took place.
Yes, okay. Did Mr. Mancha, as chairperson, engage you on that or not, seeing that he had raised that at some meeting, isn't it?
You mean the issue of
Asia?
Yeah, no, he was one of the participants in that discussion at the board.
Yes. So, but what I'm saying is you expressed your view, which I think it wasn't for the first time that he was hearing it, but did he engage you further on your views?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
I must say, one of the issues which I think is important to note is that prior to the meeting, the entire executive was asked to leave their cell phones outside in a locker, okay? Which is not normal practice. We have never done that before, okay? I mean, people go into these meetings, they put it on silent, and the board, there is not, the previous board that I was with, have never instituted that kind of
Yes.
action. And of course, I mean, this was, as I say, it's not normal practice.
Yes.
So just to fast track it a bit in terms of the timeline, that's after the board meeting. Immediately after the board meeting on the 14th of September, we are in.
So I'm sorry, was it only the executives that were asked to leave their phones outside, and other members of the board were not, or you don't know?
Chair, I think it was everybody.
It was everybody. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So in the second week of September, the 14th to the 19th, okay, Denel often gets invited to defense exhibitions internationally, where we go and exhibit, sometimes with DTI and the rest of the industry in South Africa, to showcase our technologies and meet with customers, potential customers, new business, and it's normal practice in the industry, okay? And it's also normal practice that we invite the minister, if the minister is available, and she'll come with her entourage, some of her officials. And also, because it was normal practice that we invite the chairperson of the board to come with as well, so they can see how we've been performing. There's some credibility in the reporting that we're doing with regard to our activities. So we invited Minister Brown, the chairman, Daniel Mancha, to come and accompany us onto the trip. And so we went. In London, before the show, as is normal practice as well, I convene a briefing session for whoever the dignitaries are there, in this case, the chairman of the board and the minister, to give them a briefing about what is the program, who will they be meeting, essentially what the 4 days or 3 days that we are going to be there, what it will entail in terms of the program, and some of the issues that they should take note of. But before that meeting commenced in the morning, it was in a small little meeting room, maybe a boardroom that takes about 15 people. There was a coffee station, and I was standing next to the coffee station with Minister Brown having coffee with her. And she indicated to me there verbally at that point that she had instructed some of her officials to start the paperwork to extend my contract by another 5 years because she was so happy with my performance. And those were the exact words that she used. Okay. And I was very pleased. I said, thank you, Minister. I really appreciate your confidence and whatever else. And we left it at that. Okay.
Well, that may have also, apart from whatever view she took of your performance, it may also have been influenced by the fact that, according to the chairperson of the 2011 board, the old board, that board had, or she had written to the minister, the new minister, Minister Brown, and they, as a board, they had decided to request her or suggest that your contract be extended because they were so happy with your performance.
So, and that, I mean, obviously I was very pleased with the comment to me.
Yes.
And I was upbeat and looking forward to going
Yes.
back and engaging in this process.
Yes.
But whilst we were there also, and I'll speed it up a bit, Mancha says to me that he's been talking to the Audit and Risk Committee back home in South Africa while we're in London, and they're still extremely unhappy with the LSSA transaction. And they believe they are not getting enough information. So I said, that's not possible. Mhlonto in Africa are very diligent, and they've assured me that they've given every single piece of information so that the Audit and Risk Committee can make an informed decision about what actually happened with that transaction.
But Mr. Saluji, can I just get a bit of clarity on this? Because you say Mancha again informed me. When they first asked for all the LSSA documents, that was to inform themselves. It wasn't
Yes.
because they had a complaint. Wasn't this the first time he was indicating to you that the Audit and Risk Committee actually had were unhappy about what you had done and how you had dealt with that transaction? Just clarify that.
No, Chair, because prior to that, even at the previous board meeting, he had indicated to me that there was unhappiness from the Audit and Risk Committee with this transaction. So in London, he just reconfirmed that they were still unhappy with this transaction.
So by the 10th of September, they had already managed to assimilate the documentation that they had been furnished with and come to a position where they were unhappy with you.
Well, Chair, I said they had convened a special Audit and Risk Committee meeting on the 9th of September, the day before the board meeting, where all of this was presented to them. And even at that meeting, they had expressed reservations about this transaction, notwithstanding the fact that we had given them every single piece of information that they required.
But the unhappiness at that stage, as you understood the position on the part of this committee, was unhappiness with the transaction as opposed to unhappiness with them not being given every document or information that they may have asked for.
From what I understand, Chair,
as of
they
the
claimed,
9th
they
also.
claimed in, for example, Africa's charge sheet, they claimed that she withheld information from them. Okay.
That is now on the 9th.
No. When subsequently we were suspended,
Oh, yeah.
one of the things that they alleged against her
Yeah.
was that she had kept information from them, which is not true. And I know
Yeah,
that
no, we'll get there. I just want to get the sequence right. Was it in London when you
Yes.
went with, Mr. Mancha says the Risk and Audit Committee is unhappy. And as I understand your evidence, he says they think or they say that they have not been given all the information they have asked for. And then Ms. Kabashe then asked you a question for clarification and understood you to say previously unhappiness had been expressed, and I wasn't sure whether it had been expressed by the board or by Mr. Manja or by this committee, But when you talked about that, it seemed that you were saying they were unhappy with the transaction, which I thought may be different from being unhappy about not being finished with all the documents they wanted. So I'm trying to see how many incidents of unhappiness they were expressed and what they were about.
Chair, my own view is when I look at the line of questioning, it was a combination of both.
Okay. Now, as at the 9th of September?
Yes. It was saying that was this transaction actually necessary and was it strategic?
Yes. Okay.
And on the other hand, did we follow due process?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So you are in London now, and Mr. Mancha articulates this unhappiness again, and you say your two colleagues would have provided all the information. Okay.
Exactly.
Then you can proceed.
And of course, I said the acquisition was concluded in April with all the, I went through the whole process again with him. I think what is critical here is that the strategic value of the transaction, I don't think the new board really understood the strategic importance of this and located it within that context of the defense review and the defense force's requirement to regain strategic capabilities back into the defense force. This was a strategic capability because they were manufacturing the armored heavy vehicles of the defense force, which is a strategic capability. It should never, if in a country you produce that level of equipment, you do not take that and sell it to a foreign company because there's no security of supply, firstly. You are not in control of the technology. So it was a desirable thing, not only from a Denel perspective, but more specifically from a SANDF perspective, that that capability comes back from a British-owned company back into South African hands.
Okay.
So when we gave them all this information, obviously they were not happy. And I genuinely believe that their unhappiness was just a ruse to create a context and a pretext within which they could get rid of the three of us going forward. And that's exactly what transpired in the next affidavit.
Okay.
And I've got some concluding remarks there, Advocate Kawashe.
Yes,
I don't know if
yes.
you want me to deal with some of those.
I actually would like you to,
Okay.
because as information becomes available, there appears to have been some kind of scheme at Denel. Somebody designed a scheme to take over certain functions or certain, buy certain assets or acquire certain assets. And I think that plan of action falls within paragraphs 115 to 119 of your submission.
So, Chair, if you look at my concluding remarks, what I've said is that during this period that I've described to you, I knew I had the support of the old board, but if I went to the old board, it would have created huge disruption within the organization. If I had rejected the advances and summons to come and interact with the Gupta family and ESSA, I do genuinely believe that it would have harmed Denel, and it would have also had a detrimental effect on me personally. So I must say it was a very traumatic and difficult period, that entire time. But I was also fully aware that I could not turn away from my responsibility in protecting Denel as well. And of course, in terms of the political principles, I also, at some level, thought that there was an obligation, not an obligation as such, but because of the fact that their presence in some of these interactions were there, that I was obliged to attend some of these interactions. I was preoccupied with building Denel, and it was a very stressful period of my life. And I also witnessed what was transpiring at other SOCs, and I think that's the important point that I want to make here. Is this modus operandi, this methodology of state capture, okay, was unfolding and had already started to unfold in many other instances. And Denel was not exempt from this. Denel was a target of state capture, undoubtedly. Okay. And if they had to continue with that process of state capture. There was a very clear, evident way in which this was being done. Is that you have a head, a political head that is compliant. You appoint a board that is willing to acquiesce. And you influence the executive to do what you want them to do, or you replace them. And in many instances, this is exactly what happened. And Denel is a classic case of what has happened. Okay. I'm convinced today that it can be used as a model of how state capture unfolded in this country. What I am clear, notwithstanding the pressures and notwithstanding the issues that I have raised, that I have done everything that was within my ability to protect Denel, but not only protect Denel, but to take it from a position where it was not a sustainable organization to something that could have become a shining example of what we could do in this country with some of the SOCs that have been undergoing a difficult period. So I was aware that at some point, and I was completely corpus mentis about the fact that at some point, if I did not acquiesce and do what I now know I should have been doing for them, who knows what the consequences of that. But I do believe that I was got rid of because of the fact that I stood in the way of what their ultimate objective was. And if you look at the events that subsequently happened at Denel, and as it unfolded, and the demise of Denel, that is exactly what happened.
And Elizabeth Africa and Figile Mhlonto were also gotten rid of for exactly the same reason. They stood in the way of what others wanted to do at Denel.
Chair, Advocate Chapas, Chair, I also have to just say that both Africa and Mhlonto were outstanding in the support of myself as a group CEO, and that they had played a very important role in helping me to keep this intervention at bay. And at many points, they were the gatekeepers to me as well. You know. And I must use this opportunity to thank them as well for the role that they have played. And they paid a heavy price for it. And I know, both Mhlonto and Africa, and myself as well, I mean, we were unemployed for a long period. Okay. Some of us are still unemployed. But the fact of the matter is that that's the price we paid for this.
So there's a huge human and emotional cost, really, that came with these suspensions.
Absolutely, Chair. I mean, in my case, I was suspended for almost a year and a half without any kind of employment. So, I don't know if you want me to take you through part two. I think we have a plan.
I believe I will take you through part two.
Sorry, my apologies.
No, only because with the assistance of Advocate Bam.
Yes, that's fine.
DCJ, there's actually a method in what we have decided to do.
Yes.
And it's really just to highlight the most important aspects that
that's
fit
fine.
into this background
That's
that
fine.
we've been dealing with all
That's
day.
fine, yeah.
The most important document, which we will ask you to read when you have the time to, Chairman, is, of course, the statement that runs from page 29 of Exhibit W4A. So it's from page 29 through to page 51. But we're actually just going to highlight the most...
I've read it.
Oh, excellent. So we're just going to highlight the most important portions of that.
But part of the reason why I was saying we must still do justice to his evidence is that this is not just about me and us. There are people listening, and it's important that they should follow at least the gist of the issues.
I believe Saluji is so eloquent that he's going to be able to explain. This is his story, and his colleague's story, and I believe he will be able to explain it quite succinctly.
And I've read it. It would be quite easy for him to tell what happened to him, because that's what it's about.
Indeed.
And of course, it's got to be looked at in the context of, as he was saying, in the context of what happened to certain people in other SOEs. Yes, okay. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Mr. Saluji, please take file Exhibit W4B. We're going to run through some of the correspondence that illustrates the thinking behind getting rid of you and what ultimately transpired and the reasons that were ultimately given, which reasons were not the same ones that you were given on day one when you were suspended. So if you could look at Annexure RS7, which is on page 355. RS7 on page 355. Can you briefly tell the Chairman what this letter is?
RS7. Kabashe, I assume, Chair, that you've read the document, that the circumstances around the 3 days of our suspension was also quite chaotic, and how that happened. It was just...
Yes, you know, sometimes there are certain nuances that are important, so feel free to tell the story in a way that you are also satisfied.
If I may just take even
Yeah.
less than a minute. It was, so we come back from London on the Saturday, the 19th.
After you had been told by the minister she was very happy with
Exactly.
your performance.
On Monday, I go to work as normal. We're all there. We are summoned to a meeting by the Audit and Risk Committee on Tuesday morning. We are asked individually, the three of us, in Toronto, Africa, and myself, to give oral presentation as to why we should not be suspended over this transaction.
Over the LSSA
All
transaction.
of the SSA.
Now,
This is on Tuesday.
now this is at what forum now?
At the Audit and Risk Committee.
Risk and Audit Committee, yes, okay.
So,
What's the date of this letter that you received? The letter on page 355?
the 22nd of September.
So
is
that's the
letter.
day of the meeting.
This is at the meeting
Yes.
that they have presented us with this letter. So, and they say we must give them reasons why we should not be suspended.
That was very short notice, wasn't it?
I mean, we had not any pre-notification of the fact that this was going to be discussed at the meeting.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bash, I thought you said Exhibit W.
4B.
Oh, I've got 5B.
No, sorry, Chairman.
Okay.
So,
Yes, no, that's fine. Continue.
355, Chairman.
Thank you.
So after we give the oral submissions and we are individually asked to come into the room, all of us, without having consulted with one another, the three of us, the accused in this instance, have said that we have done absolutely nothing wrong. There's a paper trail and an audit trail that can show that we've done nothing wrong, and there's no reason for us to be suspended.
Just hang on 1 second. You are not told that here is something on the basis of which it is thought that there may be grounds to suspend you. Can you say why you should not be suspended? You are just told you must say why you should not be suspended.
Yes.
And you are not given any factual basis
No.
that you need to deal with.
Chair, after they said that because of our breach of, there's a verbal exchange that is taking place.
Yes.
So that they had indicated we breached the PFMA with.
Oh,
followed
okay,
proper
they say that,
procedure.
yeah.
Mr. Saluji, you may want to refer to paragraph 3 of that letter of the 22nd, which expresses the opinion of the Audit and Risk Committee.
So then they present us with this letter at that meeting, okay? And this letter then highlights what are the things that we have allegedly contravened, okay?
Yes.
So, I mean, I think, do you want me to go through the...
No, I think if we then go to page 366, and again at paragraph 3, that encapsulates the essence of what you are saying here, where you say we requested a fair and reasonable opportunity. Just speak to that fair and reasonable opportunity.
So at that meeting, we then wrote a response on the 25th of September, okay?
Yes.
So, but this is after we were suspended.
Yes.
Yes.
So the Audit and Risk Committee at that 22nd said that by 1500 on the 23rd, we must furnish them with a response to why we should not be suspended. We wrote a letter to them to say that it's ridiculous. The timeline for such serious allegations, there is no way that we need time for our legal people to advise us on how we need to respond to these allegations, okay? So they'd given us 24 hours to do this. But in that same letter, they had indicated that we must come to a Audit and Risk Committee meeting at 5 o'clock that same afternoon. So we arrived at 5 o'clock on the 23rd, the night that we were suspended. The Audit and Risk Committee was there. They again asked us. Mancha was there as well for a short while. We brought in individually with the exception of Africa. I went in first.
Can you just pause there? However, when you went in to be interviewed by the Audit and Risk Committee, was the chairman still there?
In the evening meeting.
In the evening meeting?
Yes. And
He
then
was there during those interviews?
Just during the introductory part, and then he left.
Thank you.
Okay. So it wasn't a fully constituted board meeting. It was the Audit and Risk Committee. Again, I read out the statement which I had sent to them the day before as to why I think I should not be suspended. Okay. Notwithstanding that, Mklonto also went and read out his statement, which was exactly the same statement, to say this is why. They didn't invite Africa into the meeting. They then asked us to recuse ourselves, and they continued deliberations of the Audit and Risk Committee with a few other board members, including Mancha, till about 10 in the evening. When the other non-Audit and Risk Committee board members left, Mancha also left. We were called in individually again into the Audit and Risk Committee. Now this is at about 10 o'clock at night in the evening. And we were told that they've considered what our representations were. They've deliberated as the board, which was not true because it was not a fully constituted board. And that they have resolved to offer us a 3-month package and we must resign immediately. Okay. There and then, that evening. Or we must be suspended. Okay. Now, of course, the fact of the matter is that both Mklonto and myself and Africa rejected that completely out of hand. And then they took the decision to suspend us immediately. So within less than 6 weeks of them taking over the new board, less than 2 months of the new board coming in, without any kind of real in-depth understanding and investigation of what happened during that transaction, they saw fit to suspend us. Okay. And then,
In fact, Elizabeth Africa was not even interviewed, and yet she was suspended.
Yes.
If you then go to page 373, where you find RS 10, this is what you would call your suspension letter.
Yes. So this, Chair, this is the letter that I get from Mancha confirming my suspension and the fact that I did not afford the committee an opportunity because I did not make representations. I did not afford the committee to apply their minds, and therefore, on the basis of that, they will suspend me.
If you could just read
But
paragraph.
I'm sorry,
My apologies.
but this letter is dated 25 September. Your representations were dated 25 September as well, isn't it? The letter
During
that
the
we just
day,
dealt
yes.
with, during the day.
Yes.
Yes.
So he got those letters, and in fact, at the
Yes.
board meeting as well,
Yes.
we made other representations as well.
Yes. So that was what you were saying was not true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
If you then just highlight paragraph 4 and paragraph 6.5 of that letter for the chairman.
So it says, Chair, that you failed to provide reasons to the chairperson of the Audit and Risk Committee on or before 1500 on the 23rd of September, 2015, as to why the Audit and Risk Committee should not recommend to the board your suspension. You thus deprived yourself and the committee of an opportunity to consider your views. Now, I mean, we had written, Chair, to the Audit and Risk Committee to say that within the period that you have given us, there is absolutely no way we can respond. And besides, we do not have the documentation which is legally due to us in order to prepare some kind of presentation to them.
Yes.
Then paragraph 6 over the page says the board has considered certain things. And at 6.5, if you could read that into the record.
So the recommendations of the Audit and Risk Committee, the following, the board's consideration of these matters. The board resolved on the 23rd of September, and again I have to point out, Kabash, it was not a properly constituted board. Okay. to suspend you as an employee on full pay for a period not exceeding 3 months, or such other period as the board may determine, pending an investigation and or disciplinary hearing into allegations of misconduct allegedly committed by you.
And if the board had taken this decision on the 23rd of September, why did they ask you for written representation? Then let's move on to RS 14, which is on page 389. Your counsel is asking me to go to page 376. RS 11.
Do you want us to go to RS 11 or RS 14 at the moment?
I think we'll start with RS 11,
Okay.
Chairman, only because I'm trying to avoid having Mr. Bam come and
Cheers.
stand here.
Okay. Okay.
So can I continue?
Yes.
Please do.
Yeah.
So in RS 11, now this is in December, we're informed that Denel has appointed Denton's law firm with the assistance of Grant Thornton to conduct an investigation into the LSSA transaction and our conduct in that transaction.
Well, you were suspended by way of the letter of the 25th
Yes.
of September from Mr. Mancha. So you left the premises of the company and you were on suspension. So by the time of the letter of 15 December, you have been on suspension for part of September, October, November, and part of December.
And Chair, there has been communication between our lawyers about
Yes.
what the process is, requesting information. So there's a
Yes.
back and flow of communication.
Yes, yes.
But the important thing is that this it was a decision by Denel to institute an investigation into us. Okay?
Yes,
And
yes.
they used Denton's with the assistance of Grant Thornton.
Yes,
And this wasn't, they took that decision, we were informed on the 15th of December.
yes.
And of course, just as an aside, in the meantime, the application to the Minister and to Treasury for Denel Asia to be set up is underway in that December period, because by the 10th of December, that was just about ready to be filed.
Sorry, Chapas. I think maybe because we are slightly rushing it, there's a time problem here in terms of the
Yeah,
time scale.
yeah, so
So
that's why
can I
I
just revert back slightly, okay?
I keep on saying,
So
let's not rush in such a way that we don't
So-
do justice to.
I just want to conclude the
Yeah.
evening of our suspension, Chair, and this is of some interest as well. On the 23rd, when we were eventually suspended with immediate effect at about 11 o'clock that evening, they had immediately prepared a statement which they issued that same evening, which appointed Zwelaki Nchepe as the acting CEO.
Yes,
Okay. And he was waiting in the wings for that.
Mm-hmm.
So he was in the offices waiting to be announced as the acting CEO.
that's on the 25th of September.
On the 23rd, on the evening of our suspension.
Yes, yeah, okay.
And they appointed the acting CFO in Mklonto's position, the CFO of LSSA who did the transaction with us. He was conflicted,
Yes, yes.
but they appointed him as the acting CFO.
And who was that?
Odwa Mshalwana.
Oh, okay, all right, yes.
So, no, the Denton's investigation actually took place around the 14th of November.
But were you
Yes.
only notified of it on the 15th of December?
No. If you see this letter, it says, our clients have instructed us to inquire whether the process of writing the report has been concluded.
Complete.
Okay. We have been informed by our clients that the investigators indicated at the conclusion of the meeting that the transcript of the investigation meeting.
I'm sorry. My RS 11 seems to have one page without the signature of the author of the letter.
Chair, sorry, if I could help.
Is-
Chair-
It's meant to be only one page because I could not find the
Another
other page.
page.
But the important part of it is
It's
that paragraph
captured in
2.
this page.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So essentially what it says is that Denton's had committed to giving us the transcript of the investigation after the investigation was completed, and we had still not received it. So our lawyer was saying, can we please have the transcripts as you had promised, okay?
Yes,
And of course, they were not forthcoming.
So we'll then go to RS 14 on page 388. The letter itself is on page 389.
Can I continue?
Yes, please do.
Chairperson, this is a very important and instructive letter. Okay. In fact, in a sense, it came to us inadvertently, because when Mhlonto and Elizabeth, when they were going through their disciplinary, the lawyer had asked for a list of documents to be provided to them to prepare for the disciplinary hearing, which was set for the 25th of January. They did not set, they provided the documents, but inadvertently, this document came with that set of documents. Okay?
Yes, now these were the lawyers for your colleagues. These were the lawyers who asked for this, whose lawyers?
No, our lawyers. We had one lawyer together.
Okay, for all three
They
of
had asked
you.
for this list of documents from Denel,
Yes.
so that we can start preparing for the
And this
disciplinary.
letter came with the documents.
So I think inadvertently, this document was included without them realizing it.
Yes.
But it's very instructive.
Yes.
Who is the signatory of this
The
letter?
signatory of this document, Edward Kabashe, is Daniel Manchard, chairman of the Denel board.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. And it's addressed to whom?
To the acting company secretary of Denel,
Yes, is it Miss Lekwabe?
Fortune Legowabe.
Yes.
And I think it's important, maybe I read this one.
Yeah, read it.
He says, Dear Acting Company Secretary, re-suspended CFO and GCEO, I request you to furnish us with the draft charge sheet so that we can settle, as we need to have the charges served upon the suspended employees before close of business tomorrow, the 18th of December 2015. Further request you to instruct our lawyers to draft a settlement proposal of 3 months' payment in full and final to the 3 suspended employees. The letter for settlement must be delivered tomorrow together with the charge sheet, and further with a letter informing them that the suspension is extended until the finalization of the hearing. Now, this is the important part, Chairperson, and critical. You are further requested to inform Dentons that their report is not accepted and request them to provide us with a report within 30 days, and kindly direct them to provide information to support the charges. I mean, this is just inexplicable, that the chairman of the board is asking the company secretary to tell Dentons to change the report, and that the new report should support the charges against us. I mean, it's...
The chairman of the board, who is
Yes.
also an officer of the court.
And then it's even more interesting. The last paragraph says, and lastly, may you recall the circulated Denton's report and make sure it is not circulated.
Did you ever get hold of a copy of this report, this original Denton's report?
We have never seen the original Denton's report, Chairperson.
Yes.
The commission has also tried, Chairman, and we have failed to get hold of the original Denton's report.
Well, Denton's should be approached. Did the legal team approach Denton's
The
themselves?
investigators have been assisting us, and they have tried
Because
everything.
they should have kept one for themselves.
Chairman, we will continue trying to get hold
Well,
of.
will you continue? Otherwise, I'm sure they'll cooperate and somebody can come and testify about their investigation and what they found and what they did with the report.
Chairman, under your guidance, that's what we may have to do.
There should be, can't see why there should be any problem. They were asked by Parastatal to conduct an investigation involving the CEO and CFO, and they must have concluded their investigation and prepared a report and submitted it to the Parastatal, and certain things were expected to happen, charges, and there should be no problem with them coming to even if the report is not there, coming to testify and say what they found and what happened to the report.
We will ask the Secretariat to write a letter to them.
Yes, and I think that should be given urgent attention.
We'll do that, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Can I continue?
We then go to RS 19.1, which you will find on page 405.
Thank you, Ed. Chair, I just want
What
to say...
page?
It is on page 405, Chairman.
405.
Yes, Chairman.
Yes.
Chair, if I may just on that last letter, I mean, this is a damning indictment.
Yes, the one at page 389.
Yes, I mean, it's inexplicable that something like this can happen in an organization.
And I would have imagined that in the end, whatever investigation was done and whatever disciplinary hearing may have taken place, in the end, the board would make the final decision about what should happen to the GCEO and the CFO. And in that context, the role of any member of the board in regard to the time of the investigation may have been important.
So,
Yes.
if I may continue with 405. That's dated the 18th of February. I think just in one additional item is that Denel had proposed a mediation exercise in early February. We went to the mediation.
Well, before that, I was hoping that maybe the next correspondence will deal with what I wanted to ask you. With your lawyers and yourselves having become aware of this letter, did you do anything, or did they do anything? Did you instruct them to do anything about the letter?
No, Chair, we did not.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So Denel had proposed a mediation which took place around the 8th of February and was chaired by Advocate Paul Pretorius, where I made a representation to the Denel representatives, the board representatives, as to why we should not be suspended, and that these were false allegations, and I went through a lengthy document about what we believed was our position, and the only correct intervention that could be made was for them to reinstitute us to our positions in Denel.
Reinstate you.
Reinstate us.
Yes, yes.
The Denel representative of the board said that their departure point was a simple one, which is non-negotiable, that under no circumstances will we be allowed to return back to Denel.
But before you proceed, normally before you can have a mediation, there must be a dispute. Was there a dispute between yourselves and Denel or the board? And if so, what was the dispute that needed to be mediated?
The dispute, from my understanding, was the fact that we were suspended and we didn't agree to why we were suspended. And Denel said we were suspended because of those reasons. So the mediation was to try and come to...
But they had said there would be charges, isn't it? That's what they had said when you were suspended.
Absolutely. But they had proposed a mediation. But their
Yes.
starting point in the mediation was that our return was non-negotiable. So we responded by saying then our position is a simple one, is that we need to be reinstated. So it failed.
Yes.
Then we get to this 18th of February. And again, Mancha goes he goes public without having taken us to a disciplinary, without any kind of final outcome of this. He goes to the Parliamentary Public Committee on Enterprises and Communication, and he says that the officials were in breach of law and they failed to observe the legal requirements of the PFMA.
Is that now before the letter at page 405? Did that happen before? I'm trying
That's
to...
after.
Oh,
This is the 18th.
did you finish with that
So
letter?
we at
No,
405.
this is the letter at 405.
Oh, that's
Chairman.
where
Yeah.
you are protesting about that.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
because he's starting to make public pronouncements on our
Yes.
guilt
Yes.
when he has not afforded us the opportunity to go through a process. And of course, our lawyer is writing to him to say that this is just, it's not correct and it's not ethical.
Yes.
You may then want to go to page 417, Annex RS 23.
Yes.
Again, the
So-
salient paragraphs here are on page 418.
So the important point, Chair, of all of this correspondence that Advocate Chapas is taking us through is that we have consistently have asked them to take us through a disciplinary process. Okay, and the correspondent bears that out. So for a period of, in my instance, almost a year and a half, in the case of my colleagues, almost 6 months, where we have consistently said, why are you not taking us through the process? They just did not do that.
Actually, as I was reading your statement, it seemed that you were actually challenging them to a disciplinary inquiry to say, you suspended us because you said we have done something wrong. We are ready. We want to go to be taken to a hearing.
Chair, I mean, if you read the charge sheet, there are very serious allegations in there, okay? You would have thought that the Denel board under the chairmanship of Daniel Mancha would have wanted to expedite a disciplinary process to prove that we have done something fundamentally wrong in the organization. Yet they drag their heels, which if we go forward, you will see
Yes.
what it resulted in.
Yes.
You may want to just highlight paragraph 6, 7, and 8 at page 418.
Okay, thank you, Chapas. Chair, very quickly, the point I've just made, it says, our lawyer is writing to them. It says, our client holds the view that your client's resistance and failure to follow a fair procedure to determine any wrongdoing is pertinent to the aforesaid, and that an opportunity to be heard by the shareholder of your intention is required. We further believe, since no fair procedure has been followed to date, there is no grounds for early termination of employment of our client. Okay. We therefore urge your client to convene a disciplinary process as a matter of urgency to ensure that you have followed fair procedure and have established grounds for early termination. Given the seriousness of your intention to pursue with early termination of our client's contract, we deem it absolutely essential that the hearing be confirmed in the disciplinary process. So essentially, they wanted to just get rid of us, pay us a package, and let us go.
Yes, but you may have left out something important from what you have read from this letter. Now I remember from your statement. At a certain stage during your suspension, I think you say in your statement, they changed their approach and took the attitude that their case against you wasn't that you had done anything wrong. They were simply saying they were not going to renew or extend your contract, which was going to come to an end. I think that's an important part in the process and then in this letter, part of what you have read is referring to that when it says they were now talking about an early termination or something. But is that what happened?
Chairman, that's the next annexure that we will be looking at.
Yes, but the letter is already talking about that.
This letter is an insistence that they should be given a fair opportunity to face a disciplinary process.
Yes, but look at paragraph 7. It says, we therefore urge your client to convene a disciplinary process as a matter of urgency to ensure that you have followed a fair procedure and have established grounds for early termination. In other words, is this not referring to a discussion that was already there about early termination as opposed to a dismissal, or do I misunderstand?
Chairman, maybe Mr. Saluji can just explain that Advocate Kasim was first
Yes.
appointed to do the first
disciplinary
process
Advocate Kasim
before
was-
Advocate Pretoria. So that's the step
Yes.
that I think we've missed that he may want to
Yes,
explain to you.
yes.
Anyway, Chair, I think, again, maybe because of the time, we're
Yeah,
not following
yeah.
this thing properly. If I just can put
Yeah,
it in
just
context.
tell us
This
your
letter, which was
story.
dated the 7th of April, was a proposal that Denel had made to us through our lawyer on some other package that they wanted to pay us out on. And my lawyer said, no, that's unacceptable. We want to still go through disciplinary. That is what this is referring to.
Yes,
What
okay.
Kabash is going to come to now
Yes,
is
okay.
the follow-up of what happened after.
Okay, thank you.
And then, Chairman, just for context, at page 378, of course, you have the full charge sheet that was addressed to Mr.
Yes.
Saluji.
Yes.
Just for your records. It's RS 12
Yeah.
that has all the charges. So we have now dealt with Annexure 2023, which was at 417. We now are looking, Mr. Saluji, at RS 24, which is on page 420.
So, then this is specifically,
It's paragraph 2 that's critical. That's the critical letter that
what page
the
again?
chairman wants to know about.
What page again?
420, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes.
so if you recall, Chair, the last letter that I had read out from, our lawyer had said specifically, please urgently convene a disciplinary again. So their lawyer writes back and says, thank you for your letter. We do not intend dealing with the allegations contained in your letter. Okay? Now, this is specifically related to myself. It's not related to Mkhonto, because I think at this point, the lawyers were trying to negotiate a settlement because both Mkhonto and Africa were really emotionally trained. And I think they'd accepted that they wanted to settle with Denel. Okay. I had said, I'm not going to settle with Denel. I'll continue fighting them. And that's where, again, we had said to them that we want to continue with the disciplinary process. So then they respond back, we do not intend dealing with all the allegations contained in your letter. Our client's rights to reply to the said allegations at the appropriate time and forum remain reserved, because we had given them a litany of issues that they had not complied with in terms of the process that they should have followed. So they continue, your request for a hearing is misplaced. Your client's employment is not terminated due to misconduct. I think that is a very important and critical element in this whole process. They acknowledge, their lawyer, your client's employment is not terminated due to misconduct. We reiterate what is stated in our client's letter to you dated 17th of March 2016. Your client's contract is simply not renewed. Our client does not require your client to work the remaining part of his contract. Payment in terms of the letter dated 17th March 2016 will be made, which was the remainder of my contract up to January 2017. So after all of these serious allegations of suspension, of the charge sheet, of the Denton's investigation, Denel then sees it fit to write a letter when we say, take us back to a disciplinary hearing. They say, there's no need for a disciplinary hearing because your client's contract is not, or employment is not terminated due to misconduct. I mean, it is inexplicable that from having moved from such a serious suspension and serious allegations to a point where they have admitted in a letter to me that they will not renew my contract, but the employment is not terminated due to misconduct. So what was this a smokescreen for what? What was the ultimate intention of the suspension?
What I'd
Well,
like
I
you-
was, as you were clarifying, I was listening, but I was going back to the letter of 17 March 2016, to which they refer in their letter of 9 April that you read a few minutes ago, because I wanted to see what they had said there. And in the letter of 17 March, which is at RS 21, page 412. So I think that's where they started, or at least in writing, saying that they were simply not going to renew your contract or extend your contract. But this was about a year before your contract could come to an end. And you had you asked them to consider renewing your contract a year before? Your contract was going to end in January 2017, isn't it?
Yes, January 2017.
And they were writing to you on the 17th March 2016. That is their letter at page 412. That's where they say that your fixed-term contract had not been validly extended as per the PFMA, that is paragraph 2. And then in paragraph 3, then they say, nevertheless, your alleged current fixed-term contract of employment terminates on 31 January 2017. And then I think the next thing, later on, they say they will not renew it. So it just seems to me a strange talk that it's a year before your contract is going to come to an end. They are talking about not renewing it. You have not asked that it be renewed. Instead, you are on suspension, and there had been allegations of misconduct, serious misconduct against you. Yeah, okay.
But Chair, I think the intention of this, if I may, was to make sure that I don't return back to Denel.
Yes.
In any capacity.
Yes. But in that last letter that you read, they were now saying, well, in effect, they seem to be saying, well, there's no misconduct. We are not talking about misconduct on your part, but we just won't renew the contract. The question arises, if for as many months as your contract was still to run, they were going to get somebody else to act, they would be paying 2 people for one job being done by one person for such a long time. One wonders how they would justify that. You say there's no misconduct by the current CEO, but we don't want him to do his job so that he can earn the money that he would be paid for the balance of his contract. We'll get somebody else to do that.
So, Chair, in the Auditor General's language, it was fruitless and wasteful expenditure.
Okay, you may continue.
Mr. Saluji, I'd just like you to, for the sake of clarity and for the sake of the record, go back to page 417 and read the date of that letter into the record. That's RS 23.
Yeah, it was the 7th of April 2016.
And then we'll go back to RS 24, which is the not terminated letter. And if you look at the date on that letter,
it's the 9th of April.
So it followed on
Yeah,
the other letter.
Exactly.
Then finally, I'd like to take you to RS 33.
So it's in March 2016, about 10 months or so before your contract comes to an end, that you are told, we're not complaining about misconduct with regard to you. And ordinarily, shouldn't that lead to you being, to the suspension being lifted and you going back to work?
Chair, legally and ordinarily that should have been the case. If it was not
Yes.
due to misconduct,
Yes.
all they arbitrarily
And you were
said,
not being retrenched.
not retrenched, they just said they simply don't require me to come to work.
Yes.
I mean, it's unprecedented.
And,
Yes.
and yet you were willing to go back and perform your duties. You had a record of very good performance that they must have known if they bothered to check about how you had been performing. The minister had just expressed happiness about your own performance. And prior to the day that you and your colleagues were asked to make representations why you should not be suspended, had the new board ever complained about anything with regard to your performance?
You
No,
can't.
nothing.
A response, yes. Don't shake your head.
Yeah,
no,
so that is captured by the...
no, Chair.
Yes, okay, thank you.
In fact, can you go to page 430?
For
The 430, it's RS28. The chairman talks about the minister and the glowing terms in which she spoke of you at the AGM of the 23rd of July. This is a letter that is addressed to the minister. And essentially, at page 436, paragraph 33, you say to her, can you just read that particular sentence into the record? Paragraph 33 of that letter. It's a very long letter, but this is what you're asking of her at 436.
So, thank you, Advocate Chapas. So, while all of this was going on, Chair, my lawyer also sent a full package of documents, all of these documents that you are seeing here, in a chronological order, telling her what interventions we have made with the legal people at Denel to give us a fair hearing, and that we expect her as a shareholder representative who is responsible for appointing me in the first instance, to intervene in this process. And notwithstanding the seriousness of the allegations that were made and what the response of Denel was, including all the letters I've read out, there was no response from the minister whatsoever. So it says here.
In fact, if you start at 32, because the one leads into the other.
So we say to her, as the department in charge of Denel and the minister tasked with this responsibility, our client is of the view.
I'm sorry, where are you reading from now?
Paragraph
I'm
32.
at 432.
436, Chairman,
Oh, okay.
and paragraph 32 and 33.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Says, as the department in charge of Denel and the minister tasked with this responsibility, our client is of the view that the Department of Public Enterprises needs to urgently investigate the circumstances of and surrounding our client's suspension and the Denel board's decision not to permit our client the opportunity to perform his duties as GCO of Denel. The reason for the urgency is because Denel, as a state-owned entity, seems to have suffered as a result of these events. So, Chair, that speaks directly to what you were saying earlier on, that our lawyer is asking the minister to intervene so I can rightfully go back to work. Okay. And she never responded to this. We believe that you have the necessary statutory authority to ensure that our client resumes his duties immediately and again assume the responsibility of the GCO. So we are appealing to her to say, do the right thing. Okay. We understand that you have made attempts to elicit from the board, but we are uncertain as to whether the board is going to. So it was not as if there was no intervention that we required from the minister, but there was nothing forthcoming from her side.
And then in 39, paragraph 39 on the very next page, they communicate your position. So it's 437 at paragraph 39.
So at paragraph 39, and consistent with what we have just discussed, Chair, my lawyer writes to the minister to say, our client has instructed us to convey, as we hereby do, that he is prepared, if so required, to engage with your officers in relation to his present position as set out herein. In this regard, our client is mindful of the responsibilities he undertook when he accepted the appointment of GCO of Denel. So I'm consistently again saying that I will take on the responsibility, okay, of going back. And we said we trust that you will give urgent consideration to the content hereof. But again, I say there was no response to this letter.
Then the last annexure that you may want to speak to is annexure.
I'm sorry, can I just clarify something? When they wrote that letter that I referred to earlier on of 17 March and said they don't need you to come back to work, was your understanding that they meant that you could stay at home and then they would either give you a package that would cover the balance of your contract, or what would happen? What was your understanding,
Chairman,
or what did they say if you...
What actually practically happened was that I was obviously barred from the Denel premises. I was on suspension.
Yes.
Even during this period, we had still consistently asked to go, after that letter as well, to go to a disciplinary, because I can't just sit at home getting paid.
Yeah, but the question I'm asking is, when you got that letter, when you heard about, was your understanding that they were going to pay you for the balance of the period?
So at some point, they unilaterally, and I think it was in April.
Yes.
It was, they unilaterally,
Yes.
after that letter, was saying that they were going to pay me out for the rest of my contract, what was
Yes.
legally due to me.
Yes.
Not a golden handshake, not a
Yes.
cent more. I have never negotiated with them a package.
Yes, yes.
What was legally due to me, they unilaterally put into my bank account.
Yeah, the total amount of the balance of your contract.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Then that particular letter, Chairman, you will find at RS 21 on page 412. Paragraph 7 speaks to the payment into Mr. Saluji's account. The
Yes.
last annexure you may want to bring to the attention of the Chairman is
So-
annexure 33.
So, Chair, I mean, having gone through from September 2015, it is now coming to the end of the year, November. My contract is expiring in January. There was no prospect of them renewing my contract.
I'm not sure. I think either I or you may be getting the years wrong. The letter that we just talked about from them of 17 March is 17 March 2016. You had been suspended in September the previous year, 2015, and your contract was going to come to an end in January 2017.
Yes.
And you just told me that in March 2016, they deposited the balance of an amount that took care of the balance of your contract unilaterally.
Yes, Chair. It was about in April, so it was 10 months remaining
Yes,
in my
yes,
contract.
yes, yeah.
Now, I'm now coming to the conclusion of what actually happened with.
Yes, okay.
So I'm saying.
Oh, well, you need to first tell me what your reaction was to the deposit of this money into your account without an
we said
arrangement
it was
with
unacceptable.
you. Yes.
And my lawyers had said to them that we still insist that you take us to a disciplinary. And at the point at which you take us to the disciplinary, we will transfer the money back to you.
Yes, yes.
And that never happened.
Yes.
So after that April payment, I think there must have been a number of instances where we continued to ask for a disciplinary.
Yes.
But of course it was going nowhere.
Yes.
So all the charges that was against us, the seriousness,
Yes.
just fell away with one letter.
Yeah.
It said not due to misconduct, and they paid me out.
Yes.
So for me, it was a complete smokescreen, the charges in the first instance.
Yes. But did they ever say anything to you in correspondence after depositing the money into your account when you said through your lawyer, we still want, this is unacceptable, we still want a disciplinary inquiry? Did they respond, and what was their
I
stance?
think, if I recall, they had said, well, if you don't accept this, then put the money back into the account. And we said, yes, we will put it, but give us the disciplinary.
Yes, yes.
Yes, and that never happened.
Yes, okay.
So my contract is coming to an end in January of 2017. I've been now suspended since September 2015. It's a long period, and it has been an extremely difficult period for myself and my family. There is no prospect of them reinstating me or even taking me to a disciplinary. So I took them to the CCMA. And at the CCMA, they came to an agreement that they will drop any charges against me that still existed or will exist in the future. That they will settle for whatever outstanding monies that they owed me, whether it's pension money or leave days that are still accrued to me, and that we will part ways, and that they acknowledge that there was no misconduct. And that's the CCMA hearing that took place in November, and we concluded...
It is November 2016.
November 2016, and we concluded a termination agreement, and I left it now.
Can you point me to the termination agreement?
It's the very next document at 34, RS 34, Chairman, at page 498. It starts at 499.
Yes.
And that was signed on the 8th of November 2016.
Yes, thank you. So that's how you parted ways with them.
So that was the end of my period at Denton.
Yes, but in terms of any further payments, it was whatever it was that was due to you and nothing more.
Chair, I want to categorically state on record, I have never asked for or never negotiated a package settlement.
Yes.
On principle, all I had not requested, demanded of them, is that if they said my contract is simply not renewed, you are not going to come to work, but you are still, for all intents and purposes, an employee of Denton, that they must pay me what was due to me.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened.
Because you never refused to perform your duties.
Yeah, I never voluntarily said I don't want to perform my responsibilities.
Thank you.
Do you know if there were any consequences for the board, be it the chairman or members of the Audit and Risk Committee, for the shabby manner within which they conducted this entire process?
Advocate Kawashi, from the point at which I was suspended, I mean, if you look at the press reports that emerge in the public domain, and I think it is in the public domain, at every single point there were interventions that the new Denton board was making and the Denton executive, which were controversial. Okay, and that's what happened. I don't know what happened to all the contracts that happened there. I don't know what happened to the 35 billion rand order book. I don't know what happened with the Hoefester contract. I have, all I have is what I've read in the newspapers about the decline of Denton, to the point at which it was not even able to, they were struggling to pay salaries. Simple things like toilet paper was not being provided. People were told to bring their own coffee to work. Contracts were not being managed. So today, Denton is in a dire position. Okay. From being an organization where we had taken it to something that created and gave a potential for taking it to even greater heights. I mean, we have an SOC today that is struggling to survive.
How do you feel about that in circumstances where you know that it's not just you who says, I did my work very well as GCEO of Denton, but the 2011 board was full of praise for your performance and wanted your contract to be extended, I think, for 5 years. And the minister herself had just told you before you were suspended that she was very happy with your performance. She had instructed officials to work on the extension of your contract. And the financial performance of Denton during the time that you were there, 2011, 2013, 14, from a certain graph that we looked at yesterday, one could see how Denel was improving all the time in terms of its financial performance, and I think after 2016, then it started going down. How do you feel when you know that you could have been there and could have made a significant contribution to ensuring that Denel stayed financially viable with the team that you had, and if the old board had got what it wanted, namely the extension of your contract? How do you feel when you look at all this?
Jay, it is what it is. I think, excuse me. I've served my country well from a very young age. And when Advocate Chapas asked me why did I want to go back to Denel, or not go back to Denel, it was a national responsibility that I felt I still had and I could contribute in. And that's why I chose to go back to Denel, because I knew I had the skills and the ability and the experience to make a difference, and I did. Having experienced what I've just narrated to you, and the attempts to influence Denel in a negative way, and myself for that matter, and what it resulted in can never happen again in this country. Because I'm not talking of other SOCs, I'm talking about my personal experience. If we have allowed a situation to deteriorate to the point at which the very fundamental capabilities that allow us to defend our country are being eroded, and that people's lives are being damaged, history will not forgive us if we do not rectify that. So personally, yes. Somebody asked me the other day, would you have gone back to Denel? I said, yes, absolutely. Because I've got unfinished business there. I came to love that organization, and I came to love the people in that organization. And I had a passion for that business. And I also genuinely believe that it contributed significantly to the well-being of this country. So yeah, the personal cost, it has been a huge personal cost. It has been both from, it was a toxic environment. I can't begin to explain, especially during the suspension, that there was always this cloud hanging over you. And even now, okay. Where are our lives going to from here? I'm not so sure. But I believe that it was my responsibility and my commitment to this country and to myself as an individual and my family that I had to come here to articulate what happened, however painful and however difficult it has been. But I believe as a soldier that I have had the wherewithal to withstand a lot of this, and I will continue to do that. And I just hope that this commission is going to be an intervention, as I say, that will not repeat itself in history again. Thank you, Chair.
I don't know whether you have, I take it that you are done.
I am indeed. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes. I don't know whether there's anything else you would like to say.
No, Chair.
So I'm just giving you a platform in case there is something else you want to say.
No, I want to thank you and the people of South Africa and the government for giving us this opportunity, which previously there was no space to do something like this. And in fact, that's why many of us maybe have not spoken up earlier. But because we are in this new space, we need to use it optimally. We need to use it constructively. We need to make sure that the recommendations that come out of this environment are going to be of such a nature that the checks and balances that are there will ensure. I mean, you're never ever going to negate the problem completely, but at least there will be more stringent political accountability for how we conduct ourselves. So yeah, and I'm looking forward to having come here and given my testimony so that I can move on with my life.
And, well, I take it that you would encourage other people who may have experienced anything similar to what you have told us you went through, or those who may have knowledge of matters such as matters that this commission is investigating, you would encourage them to come forward and assist.
No, absolutely, Chapas.
Yes, yes. Well, Mr. Saluji, I take this opportunity to thank you very much for having come forward to give evidence to inform this commission about the experiences that you and some of your colleagues and Danielle experienced. Obviously, there may be other witnesses that I will hear, and obviously I will decide at the end of the work of the commission what I make of the evidence and all of that, and all the evidence that I will hear. But I really thank you for having come forward to share with the commission what you know, because as you probably know, I have been calling for people to come forward, including ministers present and past, DGs past and present, and CEOs of parastatals past and present who know things that should be revealed to this commission to come forward. And it may be difficult for some, but I would like a situation where if at the end of the work of this commission I come to the conclusion that certain things happened or state capture did happen, I would like to be in a position where I have been assisted with as much information as possible by people who experienced activities or witnessed activities or knew. I've been assisted by them coming forward and giving evidence so that we can look at what it is that we can recommend as measures that should be taken to ensure that whatever I will find happened may not happen again in this country and to anyone. So I'm grateful that you came forward. I hope that maybe through your testimony, others will be encouraged to come forward and assist the commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If we need you to come back, you will be contacted, and I've no doubt you will come back and assist us again. But thank you very much, and you are excused. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes.
Advocate Bam is just reminding me that he will make sure we get the documents that you have.
Yes, no,
Asked
thank you
him
very
to
much. No,
find
thank you.
and furnish to the Commission.
Yes, thank you.
Chairman, that is the evidence for today.
For today. Okay, we are going to adjourn for the day. We will, on Friday, we will start at, well, I had initially said 9 o'clock, but maybe we must stick to that 9 o'clock because that's the time that Mr. Mbalula has been told. Otherwise, when I look at the program for Friday, we could have started later.
Yes,
But
Chairman.
I think since we said 9 o'clock, we have to stick to 9 o'clock. Yes.
I agree with you, Chairman.
Yeah.
Let's start at 9.
So on Friday, we will start at 9 o'clock. We adjourn.